Welcome back to Darktown. Population unknown, but decreasing with every passing story. Tonight we take another journey together through this ostensibly normal, everyday American Midwest city to witness death in Darktown. It's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink and listen. In our first visit to Darktown this evening, an empty house, a mysterious break-in, and a father who can't let it go. When a seemingly simple burglary leaves nothing missing but a lingering sense of dread, one man spirals into sleepless nights and questions that don't add up. What was the intruder really looking for? Why does he feel like something's watching him? We follow his unnerving journey through his journal entries as he tries to piece together clues no one else sees, before he loses more than just his mind. A stranger in the house. Part 1. Introductions. I'm not crazy. I know it makes me sound crazy to open up my first journal entry with a line like that, but it's true. I'm not crazy. Although my therapist, Dr. Brodsky, might beg to differ. I guess this really isn't going to win you over in convincing you that I'm not toys in the attic, bats in the belfry crazy, but I still need to say it. I'm not crazy. It's just a little reaffirmation to make myself feel a bit better. I think maybe explaining why I came to need a psychiatrist who would propose an idea like writing out my thoughts would make the most sense here. Well, everything started with a break-in. Luckily, no one was home. It was our family tradition to catch a movie every Saturday afternoon. To be honest, I have a hard time recalling what the movie was about, given what would follow. It was some animated film about a boy with magical powers fighting against the Moon Emperor. The kids saw it as a kiddie film, but slowly changed their minds midway through once the action picked up. Well, the missus always tells me that I should stop treating them like children, but I'm not ready to do that just yet, given my childhood. Anyways, we got home from the AMC to find the front door kicked in. I had my family stay in the car and get on the phone with the police while I investigated. I opened that garage and took the closest thing I could find to a weapon, which happened to be a Mondo bat. Well, I silently cursed the fact that we didn't have any actual bats after the T-ball incident a few years ago. Well, a few years ago, Jason tried to get Tommy to hold a ball in his palm for him to tee off with. One trip to the emergency room later to get his luckily unbroken hand iced, and real bats were taken off the toy list. Well, I hefted the plastic toy and prayed silently that the fact we painted it black to give the appearance of an actual bat would be enough to discourage any intruder as I searched the house. Well, the kitchen looked like a tornado had rolled through. They'd swept items off the shelves and onto the floor. A bag of flour had burst and they tracked it all over the kitchen. I followed the white powdered boot marks up the stairs towards our bedroom. My fingers were so tightly wrapped around the bat now that my knuckles were white. The door to our room was wide open. I stepped inside and saw that all of our clothes had been pulled out of the dresser and littered the floor. My billfold was still resting on top of the dresser. I peeked in the closet, half expecting to see the intruder in the shadows and covered in flour with a sinister smirk across his face. There was no one there. I cleared the room and continued to follow the flour track. The tracks were fading now as most of the powder was coming off in their boot prints, but I could still see the direction they were heading in. They were leading towards the kids' room. By now my heart was pounding like crazy, and I was sweating bullets. My mind imagined the worst-case scenario as I slowly approached their room. I imagined opening the door to find an old, white man wearing my wife's panties, touching himself while looking at photos of my boys. I shoved the door open, almost driven to a blind rage by this dark thought, and charged into the room. Once inside, I was confronted with nothing. Toys and magazines littered the floor, but I couldn't tell if it was the work of the home invader or the byproduct of having a 10 and an 11-year-old living in close proximity. It was about this time that I heard the police arrive. I dropped the painted plastic bat and went out to greet them. Well, they chided me for searching the house on my own, but quickly segued into a rundown of the situation. I told them everything I'd observed and let them search through my house while I tried to comfort my wife and kids. The police investigated the crime scene for about 15 minutes, but they weren't much help. They theorized that it was a simple smash and grab due to the boot print on the front door and how everything looked hastily searched through. They questioned the neighbors, but of course the homeowners association had insisted on privacy hedges between all houses, so no one really saw anything. They took down our information and left about an hour later when it was obvious that the culprit had fled. They told us that they collected evidence, taken photographs as well as statements, and they promised to get back in touch when more evidence was uncovered. But we didn't hear anything back from them. Well, I would have written everything off, were it not for a few things. The main problem was I couldn't find anything missing. I even noticed that I'd left a billfold with money in it on the dresser that was untouched. We also checked our medicine cabinet and found nothing missing. Jewelry was left where it was, and other than peace of mind, it seemed like they hadn't taken anything. After a week of waiting, I called the police and asked them about the progress of my case. Well, they reasoned that the person was probably a first-time offender and was in a hurry. They explained that he probably saw that no one was home and made the split-second decision to break in. He probably frantically searched the house, but was so anxious about getting caught that he fled as soon as he saw that there was nothing of value out in the open that he could easily get away with. Well, their explanation worked for a while, but eventually the inconsistencies started to bleed through. There were some things that just didn't make sense to me. Why would someone go for the pantry first? Now, don't get me wrong, I'm no burglar, but targeting the pantry and stealing food just doesn't seem like a very profitable plan. If it was a simple smash and grab, why didn't he take the billfold? There must have been $100 or so in it. Why would they wreck the place and take nothing? What was this person doing? I think this, in combination with the stress at work and home, was enough to push me over the edge. It started with a few sleepless nights. Anna, Jason, and Tommy spent the first night at a motel to try and help the kids come to terms with what was happening, while I opted to clean up the house in preparation for their return. Given that the police had collected all the evidence and taken pictures, I felt justified in trying to restore the disheveled home. I put everything that was salvageable back on the shelves and in the drawers, vacuumed the floors, and called maintenance in regards to replacing the door and changing the locks. While I was doing all of this, I took a few photos of my own, just in case the homeowner's insurance would balk at the idea of actually refunding us. I got very little sleep that night, as I was busy cleaning up the mess and trying to remove any trace of the burglar's existence from my kids. A reason that the previous few nights I was unable to really sleep were due to the stress of managing a locksmith, a repairman, and a cleaning service for any things I might have missed. Anna and the kids went to an amusement park that Sunday while I juggled all of these things. Jason and Tommy were seemingly unfazed by the event and went to bed without an issue. I, on the other hand, couldn't sleep. I was tired but still on edge. Every creak and groan of the house setting off alarm bells. Anna managed to fall asleep, but my constant getting up and checking everything probably woke her a few times. It wasn't until the third sleepless night that Anna suggested I go see someone. At first I tried to explain that I was doing fine, but she persisted. It wasn't until she showed me my baggy eyes, tired face, and sullen expression in a mirror that I relented. I didn't want to worry my kids any more than I had. And this is how I first came to meet with Dr. Brodsky and have a few sessions. It's also why I'm writing all of these thoughts down now. We talked about what was going on with me, and she advised putting everything into words. At our first session, she said I have a tendency to compartmentalize these things, and that I need some sort of outlet. Well, I guess that's why you're holding this in your hands now. I always enjoyed writing and found it to be a relaxing way to deal with everything. I'll probably spend a little more time writing out some of my thoughts while I have some time off work. After hearing about my ordeal with the break-in, my boss even gave me a few days off to get my act together and repair the house. Now, with that lengthy setting of the stage, I think I'm ready to try and come to terms with everything and record my progress. Wednesday, August 17th, 2016. Went back to work today. Besides some initial awkwardness where people tried to get the full story about my absence, I was able to take my mind off of everything for a bit. While I could never make a career out of my writing, I did the next best thing. I found working at an advertising agency pushes me to be creative and use my brain. I slept a little better today. Still not getting a full night's sleep, but I did manage to drift off a few times. Saturday, August 20th, 2016. It's hard to believe that it's been a week since the break-in. The second session with Dr. Brodsky went well. I told her that I'd taken to keeping a journal as per her suggestion, and she seemed to encourage the idea. I asked her if she wanted to read any of it, and she told me that it was best to keep it personal so I wouldn't feel pressured to put on a strong front. I mentioned to her that I sometimes still think about the incident, and she said that was normal. She said it's a normal coping method to remember and try to come to terms with a trauma. I asked her to write me a note saying that I was normal for my wife to read, and we had a bit of a laugh. Life at home is back to normal. The kids are running around and Anna is busy cooking up some spaghetti and meatballs right now while I write this. We didn't get to go to the movies on account of my therapy sessions, but there really isn't much playing right now that would be suitable for the kids anyway. Thursday, August 25th, 2016. Work was a bit of a pain today. We have an upcoming project that needs to be cleared by Friday and everyone's running around trying to make ends meet. It's my job to get the ad properly formatted and set up. I must have spent an hour trying to make everything look perfect before I accidentally closed out of the program and lost all my hard work. I swore up a storm and had to stay a bit over while I redid all my work so we could meet the deadline. Saturday, August 27th, 2016. I didn't sleep too well last night. That being said, I am in a good mood. Want to know why? Well, the sessions ended today. Dr. Brodsky told me I was good to go. I was a little worried about my fitful night last night, but she explained it away by saying something along the lines of, "You're becoming healthy, that's all. You'll be healthier still this time tomorrow. I think that you're on the right course here, and while I'd love to keep charging you for a low-stress chat, I don't want to add more stress on your bank accounts. You're going to be fine. Just keep on the road to recovery." I left the office feeling better than I had since this craziness first started. I've decided to keep writing for a bit to chronicle my progress. I want to look back on this in a few weeks and reflect on how far I've come. Since it was the last day of my sessions, I couldn't get to the movies again today. And I had some quality bonding time with the boys. I asked them what they saw, but they just shared a look and said it was a secret. Can't wait to get back into our weekly movie tradition and return to some form of normalcy with my family. To be honest, that little side glance and knowing smile they shared made me feel like I was being left out. Sunday, August 28th, 2016. I'm willing to bet money that they saw a horror movie. Tommy was up all last night with nightmares. Of course, Anna slept right through it, and I had to sit by his bed while he asked questions. I brought it up today and she had this guilty look on her face. Well, Anna's always on me, saying that I can be a bit overbearing, and I understand, but I just don't want them to have the relationship that I had with my dad. I want them to look back on their childhood and remember the time we spent together as fond memories. Well, hopefully that's the end of the late nights. Tuesday, August 30th, 2016. Work continues to be a bitch. Compound that with Tommy's frequent nightmares and you have a recipe for a bad time. I woke up Anna to deal with it for the first time, but I had to go to the second time when he started calling for me. Anna had forgotten to close the door as usual. Tommy could never get to sleep with it open after watching an old episode of Goosebumps, where a kid who was visiting his grandparents found that they'd imprisoned a monster in one of their closets. Well, the nightlight helped a little, but the closet always had to be closed if he was to get to sleep. As I was tucking him back in, he asked me a very odd question. Why would someone break into our house? I was taken a bit aback, as he hadn't really brought it up since the initial excitement had worn off, but I tried to answer it as best I could. I explained that he was probably looking for money, and when he saw that we didn't have any, he left. Tommy asked if he was gone for good, and I said he was. I also promised him that if he did return, that I would spank his butt and send him running home. That got a bit of a smile out of him, and I managed to get him back in bed by about 4 a.m. I got back in bed shortly after, but I wasn't able to drift off again. Of course, that got me thinking about the break-in again, and as I wasn't getting back to sleep that night, I decided to scroll through the photos I'd taken. Staring at the photos, I noticed something new that I hadn't seen that first night. In the photo I took with the flower, there was something odd. It looked like the person had intentionally knocked over the bag and then deliberately stepped in the 1-foot wide spill with both feet. If he was in such a hurry, why would he do that? It didn't make much sense, and it got me thinking. Saturday, September 3rd, 2016. 3 weeks since the smash and grab. Had another rough night last night. On the plus side, Tommy's nightmares seem to have passed. On the downside, I'm dealing with a bit of a head cold. In September, if you can believe it. I couldn't get to sleep. I opted to stay in while Anne took the kids to another movie. This time I insisted that it had to be PG. Well, I know it isn't healthy to dwell on it so much, but the more I think about it, the more inconsistencies I'm noticing. The burglar had to have known that we'd be out for our family movie nights. I didn't recall seeing anyone outside the house when we left that day, so that means that he'd likely known that we were going to be out at a certain time. How did he know our pattern? How long did he watch our house? Oh, maybe if I dig into it a little more, I can make sense of everything. Sunday, September 4th, 2016. 22 days since the break-in. Still having trouble sleeping. I told Anne that it's just stress from work, and I think she believes me. She knows how frustrating the work can be sometimes. A company would start up an ad project and turn it down after weeks of work and make everyone start over again. I decided to walk around rather than keep her up with my tossing and turning. I carefully walked around the house while flipping through my phone. It was while I was downstairs in the kitchen that I noticed something was wrong. The pantry door was open. Anne always closed it before bed, as we've had issues with rats in the past. I'll make a note here and bring it up with her in the morning. Monday, September 5th, 2016. 23 days since the home invasion. I don't think he left. I know that sounds crazy, but just hear me out. Anne said that she remembered closing the pantry door before bed, and this morning one of my cereal boxes was almost empty. I poured out Fruit Loop dust into my bowl and asked if anyone had had any recently. Well, no one copped to it. I told myself that it was my mind playing tricks on me, but tonight another piece was added to the growing evidence pile. I was walking around the house as part of my daily routine now, and I decided to check on the kids. I cracked the door open and looked into their room. The first thing I noticed was that the room was cold. It was like 10 degrees colder than the rest of the house. I opened the door and spotted the issue right away. Their window was wide open, and on top of that, the closet door was fully ajar. I know I shouldn't have, but I had to know. I woke Tommy and Jason up and asked them if they'd left the window open. Through groggy eyes, they told me that neither of them had done that. I pressed the issue more and said that I wouldn't be mad if one of them had, but they both said that they hadn't done that. I grilled Jason and Tommy for a few more minutes before I realized I was scaring them. I told them to go to bed and forget about this. Well, they looked at me weird, but decided to follow my directions. I took a peek into the closet before I left and saw nothing but darkness. I closed it and the window before leaving their room. I didn't sleep at all. It feels like I haven't slept for so long. Tuesday, September 6th, 2016. 24 days since the home invasion. Now that I look closer, all the signs are there. I was an idiot to overlook them. The missing food just brought everything to my attention. The person broke in and tried to stage it to look like a smash and grab, but the truth is they never left. They're somewhere in the house. I see that now. And now I'm noticing things have been moved around. It's all small stuff, like a chair pulled out of the table or kitchen utensils put in the wrong drawer. Well, they're small things you wouldn't really register until you thought about them. The more I look at the photos I took, the more signs of them I see. They likely walked through the flowers so we'd be able to track their movements and search the whole house. They'd hidden so cleverly that we couldn't find them, and since we and the police fully searched the house, they assumed we'd feel safe that they'd already left. I checked the crawl space and the attic under the pretense of getting ready for Halloween. I didn't see any sign of him, but I expected as much. And this person is clever and cautious. He wouldn't slip up. I can't let the wife or my boys know that someone may be in the house with us. I have to protect them from this. Who's to say this person doesn't have some way of listening in on us? And if he knows I'm going to the police, what's to stop him from snapping and murdering us all? He may decide that he's tired of sneaking around and kill us all to evade capture. I have to outthink him. I need to catch him in the act or find some way to drive him from the house. Anna caught me looking at the photos again, but I told her that I was trying to figure out how to delete them. She offered to show me, and I jerked the phone away from her. Well, I think she assumed it was me trying to protect my pride, and that's a better excuse than anything I could have thought up. Don't you think I know how absurd this all sounds? But it is possible. Someone managed to evade detection for a year while living in a Japanese man's apartment, and you can't forget the one in North Carolina where a guy sweet-talked his way into the house and lived there for 5 days while sexually assaulting the girl who'd invited him. Oh, it makes me sick knowing that this fucker could be living somewhere and coming out when no one's home or awake to eat and do God knows what else. Friday, September 9th, 2016. 25 days since the invasion began. Had a bit of a blow-up at work. I took the past 2 days off to keep an eye on things at home, and when I called into work today, I was told rather harshly that I either needed to come in or turn in my resignation. I set up my webcam to try and keep an eye on things while I was out and went into work. My boss stopped by my office shortly after I arrived to tell me that I needed to be taking things more seriously as we'd just been commissioned for another project and he needed my head in the game. I couldn't help it. I snapped at him and told him to mind his own business. I told him that it was hard to stay focused when I had my own problems at home. Well, he looked shocked for a few seconds before turning around and walking away. He didn't make contact with me for the rest of the day. I drove home in silence, wondering if I was going to get a phone call over the weekend telling me that I'd been terminated. As soon as I got home, I checked the crawl space in the attic again. I stared into the darkness for a few minutes, terrified that my eyes would adjust to the darkness and reveal someone looking at me from their hiding spot. I saw nothing. Anne asked me what I was doing, and I just told her I was looking around. Well, she didn't press the issue, but I can tell that she's getting worried. I have to take care of this quickly before I alienate my family anymore. Sunday, September 11th, 2016. 26 days spent with this stranger in my house. Still no call from my boss, but I have bigger fish to fry at the moment. I think the intruder is onto me. It's like I can feel him watching me everywhere I go. I don't know if he's looking at me from the closets, vents, or behind the sofa or chair, or whatever, but I can feel his eyes on me. Maybe he's turned my webcam against me and is using it to remotely monitor me. That would explain why I didn't see any signs of the intruder. Maybe he's erasing the videos or copy-pasting old videos to make it seem like there's no one there. But I know that can't be right. Yeah, he's somehow discovered my suspicions and is keeping an eye on me. anything is possible. All I know is that he's focused on me. All this weekend I've had his eyes burning into me, constantly making me look over my shoulder. As I showered on Saturday, it was like he was standing right outside the curtain. Well, Anne, Jason and Tommy went to the movies without me that day. I think they know something is wrong. They caught me wandering the house, randomly opening doors, the pantry, and closets. They didn't even ask me if I wanted to go to the movies with them. They just left. They stayed out late and had dinner, which allowed me to search the house thoroughly. I have to catch this bastard in the act and get rid of him before he can get rid of us. I woke up this morning feeling his eyes on me from the closet. I sprung out of bed and wrenched the door open. There was nothing there, of course. God, he must have some means of slipping out that leaves no detectable mark on the wall. Anne was so startled that she started to cry. She keeps saying things about how I need to get help, how I need sleep, and how I need to start acting like myself again for her sake and the kids. Well, can't listen to her now that I'm so close to getting him. He's going to slip up soon enough, and I'm going to cave the bastard's head in for all the trauma he's put my family through. Tuesday, September 12th, 2016. 27 days with this stranger in my house. I got sent home from work today. I guess sitting at my desk and thumbing through photos of the house for hours wasn't the best choice. The security guard had to walk me out of the building into my car. He watched me drive off while shaking his head at me all the while. It doesn't matter. Feels like I haven't slept in over a week. I look, feel, and smell like shit. It doesn't matter. I had my wife crying on the phone today with her mum. She was speaking in hushed words, but I heard her. She wants to take the kids to their house after school on Friday to get out of this place. It doesn't matter. I feel his eyes on me no matter where I am in the house. I proved it by stalking around the house and feeling those eyes burning into me. The entire time, I could feel Anna, Jason, and Tommy watching me warily. It doesn't matter. All that matters is finding the sadistic monster and ending his life. No police, no prison. There are too many opportunities for him to get out, for him to continue to watch me, for him to worm his way back into our lives. As long as I keep moving and check spots as randomly as possible, I'm sure I'll catch him off guard. I won't sleep until I find this bastard. Thursday, September 15th, 2016. 30 days with this stranger in my house. He's in the walls. I don't know how he's fucking doing it, but that's the only reasonable explanation for why I can't find him. There must be enough space to squeeze through and traverse the house, using closets as entrances and exits. I could have sworn I heard him laughing at me behind one of the walls as I passed by it. Right, I'm ending this now. I'll tear down this entire goddamn house if I have to. No one threatens me or my family. Saturday, September 17th, 2016. 32 days. 2 days of Valium and Thorazine later, and I realized that maybe taking a hammer to all the walls in my house and screaming like a maniac was probably not the best idea. The police were called and responded fairly quickly. Unfortunately, they were a bit too late to stop me from scaring the hell out of my wife and traumatizing our kids. I think, for as long as I live, I'll hear Anna screaming and Tommy and Jason to hide in their room. She, of course, tried to stop me from entering their room with the hammer, but it was too late for me to listen to reason. I had to make sure he wasn't hiding behind their walls. In the haze of my delirium, I remember shoving her out of the way and seeing my kids shrieking and running from me. I think that memory is going to stick with me until the end of my life. Well, paranoid schizophrenia, or bipolar disorder, that was latent but triggered by stress. That's their current prognosis. They say they need a few more sessions to provide proper evaluation. Well, they have all the time in the world, as I don't think I'll be leaving here anytime soon. I asked if I could keep writing down my thoughts, and they tell me that I should be sharing those feelings with them rather than hiding them away in a journal. I think the only reason they're letting me write this last entry is so they can look through it themselves and try to figure out what the hell went wrong. The psychiatrist says that with a steady medical regimen, healthy diet, and a relatively low-stress environment, I may be able to lead a normal life. Well, I ask if she thinks I can convince my family to return home with me. She says that it's possible as long as I am serious about my rehabilitation and treatment. She's lying. I don't feel much like writing anymore. I just had my last scheduled dosage of Valium for the day, and it makes me tired. There was a stranger in my house. I can't deny that. I just didn't realize who the stranger was. I drove my own family away. I single-handedly managed to alienate my wife and thoroughly traumatize my kids in the space of a month with my insanity. I tried to protect my kids from everything and then expose them to the worst danger imaginable. An unhinged father. Well, in the end, I guess I was worse than my own father. He only ended up being a deadbeat. I became something much more frightening to them. We should have been at the movies today, as per our tradition. Watching something, anything, laughing and talking about the movie on the way back to the car. Instead, I'm here, and they're gone. Likely for good. In the few days of clarity haze that my treatment has given me, I've come to these conclusions. The intruder stepping into the flower with both feet was likely due to them trying to sidestep the open pantry door, which put them right on top of the small spill. The open pantry that night was likely from one of the kids grabbing a midnight snack of Fruit Loops and forgetting to close the door afterwards. The cracked open window in the kids' room was probably one of them airing out the room and not wanting to cop to it when their half-crazed father woke them up in the middle of the night, demanding to know who'd done it. The closet being open was a boy finally overcoming his fears. My family's fear wasn't them sensing what I was feeling. It was them realizing that I was going off the deep end. They were scared of me and what I was doing, wandering around the house at all hours of the day, endlessly staring at photos, and frantically searching every corner of the house. All of these things can be so easily explained, but yet, a part of me knows that I'm crazy. It's the part of me that can clearly see my children's horrified faces as I took a hammer to our walls to expose an intruder who never existed. That's the part of me I try to listen to. It also is the part of me that I have the hardest time agreeing with in the dark of the night. It's because I can vividly recall the scene of being led away by the police after being tasered and zip-tied. I was a ranting and raving mess at that time, screaming and shrieking about the walls and what was lurking behind them. It wasn't until I was put in the car that I saw it. It was in the second-story window. I only saw it for a second, but I know it was there. That face watching me through the window with a wide grin. It was right in the lower pane, as if they were crouched down and observing the scene with some form of sick satisfaction. It had to be there, didn't it? Our next tale leads us on a road leaving Darktown. She's inherited a map, a legacy, and a destiny that leads down a road without end. Following the footsteps of her ancestors, a lone traveller retraces an ancient, mysterious path through ghostly landscapes, the hanging woods, a burned village with a forgotten god, and a sea of salt where life itself is extinct. As she walks with only her mother's dying promise of a paradise at the end, the question grows chilling. What truly lies beyond the next bend? Why does everyone who takes this journey never return? At the end of the road. The road runs from my father's descendants to my inevitable progeny. It twists between the great pines of the Far East and curls beneath the iron mountains just behind me. I look up to their craggy peaks, briefly and with reasonable disdain, recalling my trek over that treacherous stone obstacle. I follow the road my entire life, just as my mother before me and her mother before her. Letting out a sigh, I gaze idly into the campfire at my feet. Above the flames, a pot of river water tries to heat to a boil, and I wait for it in low spirits, uneager to begin my morning hike. Impatiently, I withdraw a scroll from my backpack, hoping to distract myself from the familiar spectacle of boiling drinking water. My fingers unfurl the raggedy scroll, careful not to harm its delicate material. I look down over it. I hold in my hands a map of the East. My mother had entrusted it to me as she lay dying by the sour bogs. An infection had swallowed her leg, and we'd had the common sense to amputate it much too late, letting the foul flesh spread to her vitals. In the damp air of the swamplands, her illness overtook her. I'll never forget the look in her eyes as she handed me the map, her most prized possession. She looked deeply sad, and at the time I'd assumed it the result of her inability to complete her quest. Looking over the worn chart, I find the bogs and let my finger press quietly against the simple illustration that adorns the map. Sliding my finger forward, I follow the path I'd taken. After the bogs, I crossed the hanging woods, massive trees that lined the road, each oddly stripped of their branches. The bare trunks stretched undeterred up to the sky, towards a sun that seemed to have abandoned them. Past the woods, I'd come to the charred remains of a village. I'd never seen an actual town before, but Mother always told me that ruins like these had once housed numerous families all at once. The families here apparently had interest in some kind of lizard-bird hybrid deity. I found numerous statues and idols devoted to this winged lizard creature, littering mantles above every fireplace and standing vigilant before collapsing doorways whose masters had long since left them behind. One massive stone figure kept watch at the center of the settlement. I couldn't help but feel somber as I looked over the divine, scaled being. Whoever lived here had truly loved that god that they'd invented. I suppose it's not too crazy, though. Everyone needs something to live for, even if it is all made up. Beyond the burned village, I'd spent ages traversing the sea of salt. As I look over it now on the map, I can't help but appreciate its sheer magnitude and feel at least somewhat impressed that I'd overcome it. Truly, it had been one hell of a trial. The sun had dried up all the ocean water that legend claimed had once lay there, leaving a massive patch of salted earth. Nothing grew and nothing moved, and to pass through I'd hoarded dozens of canteens of water. I crafted the canteens from deer stomachs that I'd painstakingly hunted down one at a time. Those dead lands had marked the edge of the map, and as I sit now, I grow sad that the scrap of paper could not have guided me longer. From then on, I simply followed the road blindly, hoping that after every hill or bend in the trail my eyes would find the end. I could never get a precise answer to what lies at the end of the road, but Mother called it nothing short of paradise. Well, the end never came, and so still I walked. After I'd passed the sea of salt and moved off the edge of the map, I found myself in a jungle. The utter shock of seeing green after that desert nearly drove me mad, but once I gathered my wits, I entered the dense trees and took advantage of the significant animal life. Hunting there came easily, but I soon found that I wasn't the only hunter in those lands. Great reptiles that crept on 6 legs would stalk up beneath the foliage and lunge for my feet. The first caught me off guard and nearly took my leg, but somehow I managed to stick my dagger through his eye socket before it had chance to shut its jaw. I roasted the scaled beast over the fire and rather enjoyed its meat, though it had an odd, overly chewy texture. As I bit into its hind leg, I wondered if that winged lizard god of those villages had somehow been inspired by creatures like these, or perhaps even existed in the flesh somewhere beyond the horizon. Just past the jungles, I had to make my climb over the Iron Mountains, a task that had nearly killed me on numerous occasions. At that point, the road climbed almost vertically, and I had to construct some grappling tools from some vine and bones out of the jungle. I constructed 4 of those things, 2 of which broke into pieces upon hitting rock, and one which fell down a seemingly bottomless crevasse not too far from the peak. I fell down a shallower pit as well at one point, spraining my wrist pretty badly and hurting my ribs. All the skin beneath my left breast is still discolored and bruised from the rough landing. As I recall this last step of my journey, steam rises gently from the pot. I tuck the map away in my pack and pull the pot off the fire. After letting it cool, I drink down as much of the water as I can stomach. I chew down several large nuts that I gathered just yesterday and pack the metal pot back in with my other belongings. Getting to my feet, I sling the weighty pack over my shoulder and take the first step onwards. My dagger hangs sheathed at my hip. Rain begins to drizzle down. Sighing, I cast a patched-up hood over my head. I'd seen the storm resting on the southern sky the night before, but had hoped it would have held out until tonight. Regardless of the weather, the walk is going to be a monotonous slog. After the Iron Mountains, the ground levels out into flatlands that stretch out indefinitely far in every direction. I strain my eyes in an attempt to establish where on the horizon the earth meets the sky, but I fail, finding an endless wall of grey greeting me. The rain progresses into a downpour, and the wind picks up in severe gusts. I lower my head and clutch my cloak over my face, heavily restricting my vision but offering some protection against the elements. With squinted eyes, I struggle to make out my feet under me, taking one blind step forward at a time. Even if I wanted to stop, it would be pointless. With the flatlands all around, there'd be no place to take shelter. To pass the time, I sing gently to myself. The words have carved themselves into my memories, a lullaby my mother used to softly lend to me. Don't go in the river. Heaven knows where it goes. It could lead anywhere at all, but will never flow back home. All along the waters, the spirits sing and moan that the river flows forever, but never flows back home. I sing it over and over, a quiet mantra to keep me sane. Until Mother had died and left me alone, I'd never realized how valuable something as simple as a song could be. In time, the rain slows again, lowering again into a drizzle. Losing my hood and finishing the song, I lift my head to survey the way forward. A figure stands ahead. I freeze in surprise, staring in alarm. The silhouette stands fairly far away, mostly obscured by the steady rain. At first I consider the possibility that it could be a tree or even a rock formation, but I soon notice faint movements, as though the thing is slowly approaching me. A gut reaction tells me to find some place to hide. And as I look around, I find to my dread the same empty flatland that had surrounded me before the rainfall. A chilled wind gusts by while I consider retreat. I could turn back or even make a run for it, but then again, that would waste a lot of energy and erase some of the progress I had already made. Besides, the stranger could always chase me down if I try to make a getaway. It can clearly see me if I can see it. Running in any other direction would yield the same problem as well as risk losing sight of the road. With no other choice, I resume my steps forward. Looking ahead to the mysterious figure, I let my hand drop to my dagger. I wonder what sex the stranger belongs to. I've never actually seen a man, but Mother had warned me about them. From this distance, I struggle to tell the build of the stranger, unable even to determine a vague estimate for her height. The wind lets out a howl as the stranger and I maintain our steady approach. I find my grip tightening over my dagger's hilt and can't help but notice that the stranger holds some kind of long instrument at its side. After a few more paces forward, I realize that the item is in fact a spear. In response, I draw the dagger and hold it at the ready. At about 20 steps apart, we stop. Neither of us speaks, standing out in the rain. It wears a heavy coat and mask, hiding away any features I could use to learn more about it. My eyes lower to the jagged spear hanging from its grip. The stranger appears to have crafted the spearhead from a jagged shard of bone and bound it to the pole with what looks like hair. With careful movements, the spear's wielder holds up the weapon at the ready before speaking in a clear, ringing voice. "Lower your blade. and I'll do the same. After overcoming my surprise that it speaks the same words as me, I gently let my dagger back into its sheath. In response, the stranger points the spear up to the dull sky and holds the weapon as one might a walking stick. "So, you came from the east?" the stranger asks. "Yes," I reply, "from far past the mountains." "Could you tell me what lies that way?" "I have a map," I state, removing the scroll from my pack. "If you set your spear down, you can have a look." The stranger considers this for a moment. "All right, but you need to set down your knife as well." "Fair enough." At the same time, and keeping an eye on the other, we set our weapons down on the road. The stranger pulls off the mask and we step forward to meet in the middle. From up close, I can tell with near certainty that the stranger is also a woman. "We're off the map," I explain, pointing past the edge of the page. "If you follow the road over the mountain, there's a jungle. After the jungle, the road leads through the sea of salt, which takes it onto the map here." "I see," she says before glancing up over the mountainside. "What lies to the east?" I ask, pointing forwards. "I've actually drawn out a map myself," the stranger says, taking off her pack and digging through her supplies. "Here," she says, handing me a tattered page. Upon the page, a hand-drawn map has been scrawled, revealing a vast landscape that I've yet to encounter. "I followed it as far as I could," she says, "but it ends on the mountainside. Would you be willing to trade maps, seeing how you seem to be through with yours?" I hesitate, remembering how precisely my mother had cherished it. "All right," I agree at last, realizing that knowing the way forward must be more important than knowing the way back. After exchanging maps, we stand in silence for a while. "You know," the stranger says, "my family's followed this path for generations. Has yours done the same?" I nod quietly in response. Rain keeps its steady descent as we both consider the implications of our meeting. At last, and with a sigh, I speak. "I need to keep going. Best of luck on your travels." I step back, picking up my dagger and sheathing it away. "Good luck to you as well." The stranger nods, grabbing her spear and lowering the mask back over her face. We step around each other in a wide circle before continuing on our way. My steps ring against the stone road, and I keep my gaze forwards as I walk. I keep walking until the stranger disappears from my sight far behind. Once again in solitude, my pace slows to a halt and I stand motionless. Is this the end of the road? How on earth could I still believe paradise lay ahead? How could any of what I've been told, what I trusted in for my entire life, possibly be true now? Is my family towed away for nothing, hunted down a red herring lifetime after lifetime? How much has been sacrificed to seek this wretched end? Rainwater runs slowly down my face as I realize the answers to my questions. I don't care. Gradually my despair gives way to understanding, and I slowly pull myself back together with a shrug. Looking down the road, I realize that it's the only thing that has kept me human over the years. It's the only thing that has given me purpose of any kind. I get back to my feet and take the first step forward towards a false goal. I hold the stranger's map out ahead of me, knowing it could take lifetimes to pass through. As I move along, I realize that I can't help but hope to meet another stranger down the road. Only this time, it'll be a man.
It was supposed to be a routine stop for gas, until Justin found himself in the crosshairs of a deadly gang. A single wrong glance, and suddenly he's locked in a terrifying game of cat and mouse through the dimly lit backstreets of the city. As they close in, there's nowhere to run, no cops in sight, and every turn leads him deeper into danger. Will Justin escape, or is this late-night drive his last in Darktown? Avoid the abandoned plants down by the river.
Today, Justin sat in the back of the large employee conference room,
One of those with the panels that can be emplaced or removed to make the room larger or smaller as needed. It was medium for the current presentation. The training session was mandatory, but only so many drones could be released from their cubicles and still have enough left to complete the mindless daily tasks of their existences. One of the fun parts about working for the large corporations, he thought, was the homogeneous training sessions. The participants had already listened ad nauseum to the biannual sessions on sexual harassment and workforce misconduct. The same films every other year for the past 10. This afternoon, though, they had a new subject, at least for their organization. Active threats. The speaker was from a state police agency and had been part of their tactical response team for several years. He was pretty engaging and the material was interesting. We can relate the basic responses, run, hide, fight, to the basic survival responses. Run is flight. If we can get away from the threat, we should, and we should bring as many others with us as possible. Hide is the same as freeze. Stay in place. Hide. Turn out the lights. Be silent, mute, or turn off electronics and hope that the threat passes. And if all else fails, fight and do our best to take out the threat. Now, the key to any of these basic tactics is to commit. He said the last word very emphatically and increased his volume just enough to wake up anyone who'd had started to nod off after a carbohydrate-rich lunch. He didn't spend too much time on statistics, which was refreshing. He instead focused on how to spy a threat and the order of priority. People are always the biggest threat. There's a reason we're top of the food chain. Well, except for diseases. Yes, laughter there. He went on about other ways to be prepared. Work together to figure out plans for what to do in your workspace, including break rooms, and consider what threats may arise and whether they are imminent. If something is out of the ordinary, say something. Above all, be alert and look alert. That was good stuff, and relative to recent news events, but something about sitting in a chair, listening to other people speak, was very draining. When the session wrapped for the day, Justin was exhausted and ready to go home. The classes had lasted for the full day, so it was 5 p.m. and the rush was on to get out of the city and back to the burbs. It had snowed the night before, and although the roads were clear, there were already patches of ice in the shadows cast by downtown structures. Naturally, some goofball had had to cause a crash while most drivers are still well inside the city. He was stuck for a good half hour before he was able to get onto an exit, and then for another 10 minutes before he could attempt a different route. The GPS on his phone was slow, but hey, have a good day, and the drive home was bound to present some level of misery. He'd hoped to wait until he got closer to home to refill the fuel tank, but the 40 minutes he'd sat in traffic had drained more of his tank than he'd planned. Well, he knew he'd have to pay more in the urban neighborhoods, but he had little choice. He turned on a street that ran in the general direction he needed to go and saw the yellow glow of cheap outdoor lighting at a corner convenience store. It was already dark, so he couldn't see much of the area, but knew it was only marginally sketchy, or had been a few years past when he'd last had to dodge a crash on the same stretch of freeway. Justin truly hated driving inside the city, off the freeways. The constant traffic lights and stop signs made it a dangerous labyrinth of cross-traffic and insane drivers. He had to dodge around one small car that inexplicably slowed to a near stop. No brake lights, it was just suddenly in the road and stopped. Well, fortunately, he had already started slowing to turn into the filling station. As he passed the little car, he saw a young woman, a girl really, sitting behind the wheel, texting. He rolled his eyes and griped. Figures. Wouldn't want to pay attention to the road when there's a critical text from your idiot friend. Ms. Stuck on Stupid. He pulled up to the pump and took a look to see if there was any sign of an illegal scanner. That was one of the safety tips he'd learned that day. Then he paid with his card and set the pump lock while he texted to let his wife know he'd be late, but he was on his way. She sent back a standard, "No prob, please be careful."
The pump clicked off very suddenly, and he knew that it hadn't gone long enough to even fill half a tank. He set the phone down on top of his medium-sized SUV and used the grip on the pump handle to finish pumping the gas. Oh, it was pumping slowly. The station's tank must have been getting low. As he gripped and re-gripped, cursing under his breath at the pump, he caught a chill. That feeling of malevolence and danger creeping up from behind. He looked over his shoulder, and there was nothing. Just some hood rat driving by blasting out window-rattling bass from his POS ride. He thought. Speakers are probably worth more than the car. He looked forward at the door of the convenience store and saw the source of the danger vibe. Two men wearing dark hoodies and shades barreled out of the doorway towards a late 90s-looking yellowish Pontiac with several spots of both grey and red primer at various points on the body. The second one through the door looked up at him, and they locked eyes. Well, Justin's locked on the robbers. He thought the robbers were locked back, though all he could see were the large dark lenses of his shades. Wow, the momentary shock of making direct eye contact with a witness made Denarius angry, and he pointed his pistol at the fool. "Mind your business, asshole," he screeched. The other runner stopped before he climbed into the waiting Pontiac. "What's the matter, D?" Oh, great, Justin thought. Now he had two robbers, no, three. The driver had turned her eyes toward him, all staring in his direction and pointing various levels of firepower. He froze. He didn't know what to do. There was no place to hide. He was absolutely terrified. And then D aimed at the cover for the gas kiosk next to Justin's head and fired a round. He held a small .38 caliber revolver, but it looked enormous to Justin at that time, and the sharp crack sounded like the roar of a cannon. Wow, that did it. Time to run. He dropped the pump grip, dove into the SUV, and started the engine. He was gone in seconds, leaving the crooks to leap into their own car and leave the property. His heart had leapt into his throat, and his pulse was pounding. He drove forward as quickly as he could manage, until a red light up ahead caused him to brake. He looked in the mirrors and saw the Pontiac leave the convenience store lot, turn toward him, and approach from behind. He thumped on the steering wheel in fear and frustration, and as soon as the light turned, he laid on the horn to get the person in the car in front of him to move. He saw the silhouette of a hand flipping him the bird as the jerk pulled slowly forward. He tried to change lanes to pass him, but the jerk cut in front. Justin was in a newer, nicer vehicle. Well, he knew that jerk face knew that he wouldn't risk running into the jerky beater. He checked the mirrors again. Oh, crap. The Pontiac was creeping up behind him. He took the first left available down a side street. The beater driver honked at him as he continued forward in the jerkmobile. Justin cut across the oncoming traffic and onto a neighborhood street. He desperately checked the mirrors again. Maybe he could turn again and lose the Pontiac. Oh, no. There they were again on his tail and closing fast. He ran a few stop signs and hoped that a cop would be there to stop him. Nope, again. Apparently they had better things to do than patrol the rough parts of town. Not a police car in sight. After a few more blocks, he whipped to the right, down another street. He immediately had to slow because so many vehicles were parked along each side of the street. If even one car tried to come toward him on this narrow roadway, they'd have to stop, and one of them would have to cram into one of the narrow driveways on either side to let the other pass, or back down the street through a gauntlet of parked cars. He didn't care, though. His mind was on running, and he made the next left and hoped that it would offer a wider path. It did, but only slightly. The nightmare twists and turns went on for a while, until he was completely lost. Yet when he finally worked up the nerve and looked behind, there were no ultra-bright headlights. The Pontiac was long gone. The initial adrenaline dump had jolted his heart, and the chase he'd imagined had kept his pulse beating rapidly. He gulped in air and tried to calm himself. He needed to get his bearings. He'd end up in an area that was an old industrial park. Many of the plants and warehouses had been shut down for years. He turned into the first driveway that was open. As soon as he completed the turn, he switched off his headlights and looked for a safe place to hide. It was time to hide for a while and assess the situation. He was able to pull in between a building and a rusted shipping container. He hoped there'd be no nails or broken glass under the light cover of snow. He looked at the dash and saw that the check engine light was activated. The fuel gauge read that he had just under a half tank of gas. He stepped out and crunched a couple of steps to the gas cap, put it in place. He knew that the check engine indicator light would reset when he turned the engine off and then back on. He chanced to peek around the shipping container and saw no one on the dark roadway that weaved through the plants and warehouses near the river. He decided he had time to make a call. "Oh, crap. Dang it, crap," he shouted as he realized that he'd left his phone on the roof of the SUV at the gas station. He stomped around behind his vehicle for a while, cursing himself in frustration. That phone was gone. It likely lay crushed on some street in the hood. He took a few breaths. No way to get help, and no way to navigate. He no longer had his old city key map book. No, he had GPS on his phone. Who needed the clutter of actual maps? He was feeling very cold and a bit dejected, so he climbed back inside the warm interior of his SUV and sat for a moment. He felt that it was probably safe to continue. The Pontiac and the murderous gang were long gone, doubtless enjoying the fruits of their little outing and laughing at the stupid suburbanite and how he'd lightly soiled himself. Mission successful, witness intimidated. He considered his options. He could simply drive until he came to the river that wound through the industrial park. He knew a few streets that crossed canals that led to the river. That would be even faster. He'd find a familiar street soon enough. He relaxed and put his car in drive. Time to get home to his Ashley and their kiddos, and even the goofy schnauzer they'd adopted from the shelter. He rolled further into the park district, but instead of the human-produced lights getting brighter, they got dimmer, and he saw that many of the street lights were out or missing. He crossed a few canals, but none of the streets around them had names he recognized. Well, he was still hopeful he'd find something familiar, when the engine began to clunk and sputter. He kept going, hoping it was just knocking for the cheap gas from that crappy hood station, but it finally coughed its last breath and died. It was hard to turn the wheel with the power steering off, but he managed to get over to the side of the roadway. He flipped on the hazard lights. Not that there'd been any other traffic for a while, but it was the right thing to do when one's nice vehicle becomes a road hazard. He used the fob to try to start the engine again, but it wouldn't come to life, and the check engine light remained a glowing reminder that he wasn't going anywhere. The roadway was wide. It had been made for big trucks and vans, and it was fairly level. There was a driveway about another 20 yards ahead, so he decided to try and push his lump of plastic, metal and rubber out of the way in case anyone decided to drive down this darkened roadway. It was empty. Closed plants on a cold, dark night, with a forecast of more snow. Well, he had to suppress a shiver from the creepiness rather than the cold. The electronics still worked, so he was able to get the steering wheel unlocked, and after a grunting, straining start, got the thing moving and made an awkward turn into the next lot. He managed to get the SUV into a space beside the gateway. Fortunately, the gate consisted of a chain currently snaked on the ground across the driveway. Many businesses use them as an inexpensive way to stop trespassers from driving into their lots after hours. Maybe the place was open, or had a security guard or something. Maybe even a phone, so he could get a tow. The parking lots in the area were all still lit, a testament to the wastefulness of city government, and yet a comfort to him at the moment. His hopes dwindled as he approached the big plant and warehouse complex. There were no lights shining through the windows in what looked to be the office portion for what the sign proclaimed was Tilancia Enterprises Incorporated. The entire area had a stench to it. It was on the downwind side of the city for a reason. He approached the windows anyway and looked inside. Just some scraps of paper and some ancient-looking furniture. He decided to get a better view of the area and walked toward the other end of the large building that faced the roadway. As he looked around the corner toward the back, he could barely see anything. The building lights were all out, and the parking area lights were dim, and the ones that were working were even more sparse than the streetlights. He let his eyes adjust for a moment and made out a set of stairs that clung to the outside wall above a side entrance. He cautiously stepped forward. God, who knows what kind of junk is on the ground at a place like this, he thought gloomily. He made it to the stairwell and checked it with a good shake. There were some rattles from above, but nothing that made a climb seem too precarious, so he took the chance. The metal of the railing was freezing, and his light gloves didn't do much to help protect his hands. He made it up several flights and was again facing the back of the building. The air had freshened into a breeze, and he shivered with cold as it penetrated his office-style slacks, dress shirt, and blazer. Yeah, he'd have to retrieve his topcoat from the SUV. He could make out a line of trees at the back of the property, and a shining ribbon behind them that had to be the river. There were lights, and even a few cars passing along the other side. Great civilization, he mentally celebrated as he made his way back to Terra Firma. All he had to do was figure out where the next bridge was. It may even have been the primary one he'd pictured on his mental map. As he let go of the rusted rail, it let out a deep, ringing gong sound, and the lower part of the structure rattled like it was providing a warning of some kind. He was stopped, and a chill hit him that didn't involve the temperature. It was more profound than the one at the filling station. This one left him shivering in both cold and fright. He gazed into the poorly lit surroundings, and then saw a double glint of light near the back of the building towards the tree line and river. In other circumstances, he'd assume that the glints were from eyes, but they were too big and too high off the ground for a person. He thought that maybe it was just some object that had caught and reflected the meager light, or maybe even something on or across the river that shone through the lifeless trees. And then the eyes blinked. It wasn't a twinkle of reflected light. This was lids briefly closing over eyes. Another shiver took him, and he started to step backwards toward the front of the building, and what light there was, and to his automobile. The eyes moved forward slightly and slitted. He turned and fled like a madman toward the SUV. At first, he would have sworn that he heard large, pounding footsteps giving chase, but when he made it back to the driver's side door, he chanced to look back and saw that nothing had followed. He sat in the vehicle for a while. It was getting really cold outside and the wind had picked up a little. He thought about it. His nerves were certainly strained, and that dark area had been pretty spooky. Maybe he'd just conjured up eyes in his distressed state of mind. Well, he was justifiably paranoid about being chased after the earlier events of this evening. Once he'd convinced himself that it was his imagination and not a scary monster in the dark, he started thinking about what to do next. Maybe he could hold out until morning, and maybe someone would drive by and see him. About that time, small flakes of snow began to settle on the windshield. Well, he'd be covered and camouflaged long before morning. He regretted now that he hadn't renewed his vehicle tracking system account after the free trial period. God, an unnecessary expense, right? He chided himself. He was on foot and had to decide where to go. He didn't have a flashlight other than the one on his stupid phone. The thought occurred to him that he'd become too reliant on that single piece of tech. But in any case,
That meant following the streetlights until he could find the next turn and get to a bridge. I'm almost home. Just have to make a plan and commit, he thought, as enthusiastically as he could manage. It was time to test the classroom theory. He climbed back out of the SUV, donned his topcoat and a scarf that Ashley had knitted for him when they were still dating, and started hoofing it down the long parking area that spanned the next few buildings. He stuck close to the fence and the lights, but didn't want to walk any further than necessary. There'd be another exit ahead, or better still, a shortcut toward the river. After a few minutes, the exertion warmed him some. Well, he wished he'd brought his heavy winter coat. The topcoat was longer, but not made for a night out in the frozen wastes of the urban tundra. As he passed the first building, a plant office, and approached the next, the plant, he glanced over to the space between the buildings, where he'd climbed the stairwell. He saw shady, indistinct figures shift within the deeper shadows. He looked ahead and hoped that they would just keep hiding and stay away from him. Just figments of my imagination. Maybe stray animals of some kind. Non-rabbit strays, he kept telling himself. Maybe it was homeless people who decided to shelter in the abandoned structures. They'd probably be shy about approaching strangers unless they in some way felt threatened. If it was people, then his vehicle would likely be toast before he could get a tow, he thought, forlornly. But better it than him. He had good insurance after all. He'd already started to forget about the potential threats from the shadows as he mentally completed the claim forms. Justin's hopes of a shortcut were dashed by a long cross fence that blocked his way. He'd passed the second driveway, so he wouldn't have to backtrack very far, but it was getting later, and he was tired and cold and hungry. Oh, he just wanted to go home. It didn't help that the snowfall had increased. It was a nasty mix of tiny flakes and ice pellets, bitterly cold on the gusts of wind, and they stung his forehead where it was exposed to the elements. He wasn't sure he could continue much further. He needed a break from the weather. It was time to find a way indoors, even just for a little bit, to get out of the wind and precipitation. He headed back towards the buildings and the river beyond. He followed the newly discovered fence and found a large gate opening, clearly for vehicle traffic. He passed through and was on the next part of the property, the warehouse portion of this particular complex. Oh, good, he thought. No imaginary fiends on this side. He chuffed and slogged until he reached the Warehouse A, Tilancia Enterprises Incorporated. The entrance and front area contained an office section, but there were broken windows on the front. It was definitely abandoned. There would be no heat, but once inside he could make his way to interior rooms that would be out of the wind and wetness. He tried the front door. It was locked and bolted. Oh, seriously? He thought. It was easier just to clear out the glass on one of the front windows and climb through than to try and get through the secured doorway. As he kicked out the remaining pieces of glass, he snagged his lower leg on a jagged, protruding piece that was stubbornly placed in the side of the frame. They didn't do too much damage to him, but his trousers were ruined. God, this just keeps getting better, he sighed inwardly as he hiked his damaged leg over the sill and gingerly balanced himself with a hand on the frame. He made it inside without incurring much further damage. This area was definitely abandoned. Not even any junk furniture, just a wet, mouldy floor. The exterior light penetrated into the hallway that led away from the front office. He could see nothing else, and knew that there was no way there was working electricity. He had a tiny light on his key fob, so he stepped into the darkened hallway and used it to look for a more likely room and maybe an old chair or desk where he could sit for a moment. The tiny light wasn't strong, but in the near total darkness, it worked remarkably well when he held it close to placards near each door to read them. The offices on his right had windows, so once he opened the interior doors, he could see at least a little of what was in front of him. The rooms on the other side of the corridor were meeting rooms or for utility or storage. He was about to enter the largest office he'd found when he heard a loud noise from deeper inside the large structure. A creaking, moaning sound that startled him and gave his adrenal gland another workout. It was followed by rattling noises. Likely just the wind, but maybe some rats. Nevertheless, he gave a brief shudder. Nothing to fear, Justin. Just fear itself. So stop this paranoia trip. He chuckled to himself in an attempt to relax his taut nerves. The large office had a chair, but it was broken. However, there was a solid-looking, if ugly, little table in the corner by the window. Oh, perfect. Finally a break, he said to the gloom around him. He had a couple of tissues in his coat pocket at this time of year. Well, one never knew when the old honker would start to leak from changing temperatures. He used the tissues to wipe the worst of the crud from the surface of the table, or at least spread it around some, and then carefully sat on it. The relief was instant. He'd been walking outdoors in snow with shoes that were designed for interior office work. Well, he hadn't gone far, but the dogs were already barking. He attempted to look out the window, but it was covered in grime, and the bottom ledge was filling with snow. There was little light anyway, just the last forlorn beams from the parking lot lights, and they were weak to start. He took stock of his situation. It couldn't be much further to a bridge that would lead back into more heavily travelled parts of the city. It wasn't too late in the evening. Well, he didn't know for sure, since he typically used his phone to keep time, yet the clock in his SUV had read 6:59 p.m. before he'd locked and left it. Well, he estimated it was about 7:30, so people would still be around and somebody would be available to help. He realized he was thirsty. Nothing he could do. His stomach growled. Again, no resources. He was cold and feared that if he sat for too long, the snow would increase and make walking more difficult. He was as rested and warm as he could be under the circumstances. He reached down and tugged at his tall pants leg and peered beneath to survey the damage. Just a scratch. Not much blood, he satisfied himself. He'd resolved to get up and get started again, when the already feeble light coming through the window dimmed further. His eyes had adjusted to the gloom, so he could tell that something substantial had occluded the space between the light and the window. He saw a vague silhouette outlined in the window. A hulking figure that appeared to face toward him. It looked somehow fuzzy and indistinct at the edges, but was clearly tall and broad. There was no neck, but it was definitely anthropomorphic and possessed wild-looking hair. It loomed closer, and he saw a hot breath fog the window and block even more details. Some part of his mind knew that the lighting and smeared window were lightly just distorting a human figure, but the hindbrain, that little remnant of our early ancestors, screamed at him to run. And he decided to do just that. The figure could be anything from a crazed drug addict to a security guard, but he didn't want to find out while he sat alone in the near dark. As he reached the doorway, another groan and creak emanated from the interior of the building. This one originated from the front entrance and was even louder. It was accompanied by a moaning, hissing, organic sound, like a large animal breathing deeply through some sort of obstruction, or maybe underwater. Well, he had no choice. He turned right and fled further into the interior of the building. He was fortunate that nothing blocked his way as the shadows deepened to full-on darkness. He all but ran full out, his arms stretched out in front of him. And then he hit an obstacle. A wall? No, a door. A large swinging door with a heavy rubber seal. It stuck for a moment, and then gave way when he broke the seal. He couldn't see anything, but the hallway seemed to widen into a larger space around him. He reached out to either side, but felt no walls. He drifted right until he touched the wall he'd been following, a solid outer wall of the building. He again started forward, this time more cautiously, but still at a good fleeing pace. Perhaps he corrected himself. Whoever it was will give up the chase and decide not to pursue him into this murky den. Then he heard the swinging doors crash open behind him. He again began to run, arms outstretched. He was too frightened to consider the danger of his actions or obstacles that might be in the path of his feet rather than his upper body. He heard the moaning, hissing breathing behind him, accompanied by scraping, shuffling, thumping steps. There was no point in looking over his shoulder in the near total darkness, but his fear-addled brain did not make that logical connection. The head turn caused him to lurch left, and he lost touch with the wall on his right. He was now in a wide open space. He could feel the air stir. He couldn't see the threat that was still approaching behind him. He could run into something at any moment. And then he did. Not a wall or a door this time, but something small and hard, and set just the right height to greet his shin as it rushed forward. His left leg picked up a bad bruise and pressure cut to go with a slice on his right leg from the window glass. Justin sprawled forward and skidded on his hands. His right wrist definitely took some damage. It may have been broken, but definitely sprained. The painful shock of his landing brought some sensibility to his mind. He looked around fruitlessly, then held his harsh, forceful breathing for a moment, and just listened. He could hear his heartbeat in his ears. He could hear the weird breathing sounds and freakish footsteps, but they sounded further away from him than they had. There was a coarse, whispering conversation between two or more of whoever had chased him, but the sounds were too low and garbled to make out the words. He had to breathe and try to take in air through his nostrils so as to be as quiet as possible. The result made him gag, and he nearly retched. A smell came across the lightly stirring air. The stench of rotting flesh and plant life, of mold, mildew, and choking spring pollen, with just a hint of fishiness. It smelled like a swamp. No, it smells like the very polluted river, he realized. The entire space was filled with a vomit-inducing stink, and it was getting stronger. It was then he registered the shuffling, scuffling steps approaching from the blackness. He felt around himself with his left hand and attempted to find his bearings. His hand came across a hard object, a piece of wood, squared off, about 3 feet long, with grooves running along the length like something used for packing, his mind registered. He grasped his new weapon and used it like a cane to help him stand. As he put pressure on his left leg, the pain from his severely barked shin shot up his leg to his spine and beyond. Well, he knew he wouldn't be doing any more running tonight. The best he'd be able to manage was a fast limp. He reached out with a stick to try and locate a wall or anything that would give him some security. He hit something semi-solid, and the sound and feel produced was that of wood on wood. He followed his guide stick and felt around for a few moments. Stacked wooden pallets, he reasoned. It was definitely in the warehouse portion of the structure. He felt further and found the wall against which the pallets were stacked. He felt up along the stack and determined that the pallets were stacked to a height just above his head. This was it, as safe a corner as he would find to make a stand. The sounds of large beings with shuffling gaits approached, and the moaning, hissing breaths grew louder and the odor more pungent. At least some of the stench came from these 2, 3, maybe more things. His mind gibbered, back on the verge of panic. Then the eyes glinted and flashed. They were large and obviously belonged to nocturnal creatures. There were 3 sets that he could see. If they were on human figures, then based on the height, he stumbled upon the lair of some kind of pro basketball player, zombie, vampire, swamp monster people, he thought as his mind drifted toward a break. Then he thought of his family, and indeed his whole life. Whatever was out there was a threat. He tried to run, tried to hide. Now it was time to fight. "Get away!" he shouted. "Get back and stay back or I will hit you." His voice sounded more high-pitched than he'd always thought it was. He clutched his right hand with the injured wrist to his breast and used his left hand to swing the stick forward and back in front of him to ward off his attackers.
I don't want to hurt you, but I will. Well, I don't sound that committed, he realized. I don't feel it either, but, well, no choice. He swung the stick as hard as he could toward the closest set of eyes. Something grabbed the stick, and before his mind could even register that the motion was arrested, the stick was snatched and flung. He could hear it strike something in the distance, and the ensuing clatter, as it ricocheted and fell, echoed in what was clearly a large empty space. The moans grew louder, and the eyes came closer. The stench became overwhelming, and his brain shut down. Well, if there had been light, he would have seen the greyness obscuring his peripheral vision until it tunneled. As it was, the last sensation he experienced was the train tunnel rush of sound in his ears as he descended into the mineshaft of unconsciousness. His mind registered pain and motion all at once. The pain was in his legs. Something gripped them. They were both pressed together in a large crushing vice of a hand or paw. The motion was from his being dragged behind a large creature. His arms hung limply above his head, and the right wrist registered a sharp pain as it limply struck some small, rough object. It was mostly dark around him, but they were once more in a room that allowed some exterior light to penetrate through a large window. When the dragging motion stopped, he was lifted and slung unceremoniously atop a large table. He let his eyes drift slightly open, and immediately wished he hadn't. He squeezed them shut and turned his head away from the intolerable sight. He heard some loud moaning and hissing, some type of slobbery speech. He could almost make out the words. Not food. Look for. Cold. Green. Another coarse speaker urged. Now. The discussion went on like that for several minutes as a third, vaguely whiny voice joined in with the others. The argument became louder, and each party grew more insistent and agitated, though less coherent. Eventually the argument, the entire mess of slobbery mush-mouth speech, descended into shoving, grapples, and blows. As the sounds of combat resolved, Justin finally had to open his eyes to see if he was in even more danger. No, his mind internally screamed over and over. The three beings before him tussled and slugged at one another in mindless fury. The light was poor, but his eyes had fully adjusted to the darkness. They were all well over 6 feet tall and disproportionately wide through the shoulders and chests. They were covered in what initially looked like green, slimy fur. Well, he'd seen a movie with a sniper in a ghillie suit. That memory came rushing back to him. They were a mottled mixture of greens and browns and slimy tendrils in place of hair, like a mound of swampy moss had risen and grown arms and legs. Well, the fight had taken the creatures to the far side of the room. It appeared to be primarily between the two larger figures. The third figure just crouched in a corner and clutched at a wound to its elbow. Justin stared at a moment, mesmerized in horror. And then he saw his opening. The largest monster had shoved the middle-sized one into the corner above the now moaning and screeching smallest one. It held the other by the throat and pummeled at the plant man with an enormous fist. Justin half hobbled, half ran, at the top speed of which he was capable. He fled through the open door and looked around. He was back in the dark, back in the large space. The room had been some sort of break room for the warehouse workers. And then he saw it. To him, it was like the proverbial shining city on a hill. A small door with a small window at the end of a long, dark space. It was a cleaner window than he'd previously observed in this warehouse of woes, and he could see tiny, flickering lights on the other side. He made his limping way toward the emergency exit. If this wasn't an emergency, he couldn't imagine one. The sounds of the battle faded behind him as he reached the bar. Even in the dark, without looking, he knew that there would be a sign on the bar that read something like, "Alarm will sound if pressed." Oh, if only, he thought, as his mind flooded with temporary relief. Then he heard the moaning and bellowing calls from behind. Apparently the dispute between the monsters had been resolved one way or another, and his fate was once again their concern. He stepped back from the door and into the shadows. He felt a crate of some kind behind him. He hobbled to the other side and crouched. He saw angry, alarmed eyes flash in the dim light from the break room. Then two hulking shapes lumbered out into the darkened spaces of the warehouse. A third limped behind them. It held one arm in the other, and slowly made its way directly toward him. This was it. The creature would have him shortly. No weapon this time. No big one to jump on it and stop it from devouring him alive. Just death, slowly dragging its embodiment toward him. When it reached the emergency exit door, it paused, looked over at him, where his head rose above the crate, and his eyes reflected the modicum of light. It let out a last moaning, hissing breath and pushed through the doorway. Justin crouched in place. He was too afraid to open the door and try to leave with that thing lurking just outside. He was sure it had seen him. He didn't know why it hadn't attacked. Maybe the beatdown from the big one had convinced it to pass on this happy meal. Then he noticed that the sounds from the other two had faded as they moved towards the front of the building. Perhaps it would be safe to follow them. First he took out his little fob light, while the feeble beam reached several feet into the gloom. His eyes had truly adjusted, and the thing was of some use. He took a look at the crate behind which he cowered. The wood framing around it was crushed on his side. There was another crate, possibly metal or plastic, inside the wooden casing. The inner crate had holes in it, but whatever had been inside was gone or dead. It certainly smelled dead. He made out a label on the wooden frame, some East Asian lettering alongside English letters that read, "Handled with care, product of China." "Well, thanks, China," he said sotto voce. He used his tiny light to get back to the break room, and then, a little further past the entrance to it, he found a side exit near some lockers and an old employee punch clock. He first cracked open the door and carefully peeked around outside. Nothing. He listened carefully. Nothing. He sniffed the air. A foul odor was trapped in his sinuses, but the air outside was fairly fresh, wonderfully so in comparison to what lay behind him. The snow had stopped. It hadn't been a heavy fall after all. The cold night air awakened his mind, and he finally stepped out with confidence. He glanced toward the sinister gloom in the direction of the river. He saw a well-lit restaurant district just on the other side, the source of the light through the emergency exit door window. He wondered briefly how people could eat so near the stench of the river. The colors on one of the signs registered somewhere in his subconsciousness and bubbled up into recognition. Phineas Fubar's Fantastic Fish Tacos. He knew that place. He knew where he was. Oh, he had only to make it a short distance, cross a bridge, and he'd be free and clear and on the way home. He started quickly limping toward the front of the warehouse building. He made it to the front corner, and the welcome light from the parking area greeted him, and the icy breeze slapped into his face, followed by a large hand that slapped him to the ground. He was out before his body struck the pavement and sprawled supine in the fresh, fallen snow. Several years prior. "Come on, guys, be careful with that thing. You know the boss wants it put up there for a reason." Big Sam, as the warehouse foreman was known, rumbled at his normally most trusted hands, the inseparable duo of Charlie and Miguelito, Little Mike. Charlie, at the controls of a small forklift, glanced at his supervisor. "Sorry, Big Sam. You know this lift is about to give out. Should have been replaced a long time ago." Big Sam was a reasonable sort. "Yeah, I know, but it's not like business has been great lately. Probably why the boss makes these deals. No idea who the guys are that come to the back door, but I suspect they're government types. Anyways, what they pay is why we still have jobs." Next round of layoffs is coming soon. Places are shutting down all over the river district. We probably best start looking. But, hey, keep that under your hats. We don't need to panic. Besides, this means we'll get to start applying for jobs before the rest. Miguelito piped up. Cool, Big Sam. You're always looking out for us. Thanks, man. Charlie nodded in agreement. Definitely. Maybe we can get hired at the same place. Keep the team together. Yeah, well, first we need to get this monster unloaded and on the floor, Big Sam directed, and flicked his chin toward the crate. Charlie fiddled with the controls and the machine whined, but the lift mechanism did not budge. He rolled his eyes over to Big Sam. Hey, it ain't budging. It's lifted and lowered its last load. Big Sam cursed in a low voice. Okay, fellas. Guess we do it the old-fashioned way. Just us to lift, though. Nobody else handles the back door freight. Charlie let out some grumbles as he climbed off the middle machine. Miguelito shrugged and moved to the front of the box. Big Sam and Charlie did the heavy lifting, and Miguelito lifted the front as best he could and guided the load toward its destination. They almost made it, but when the back of the wooden outer crate cleared the forks, the load shifted, and that end of the crate crashed to the floor. The wood splintered, and a few boards sprang. Big Sam stepped back and cursed. He had a gash on his arm and hand. Charlie and Miguelito had open scrapes on theirs. The bleeding trio gamely pushed the crate into place beside the emergency exit door, despite their open wounds. They set aside the shop rules. This job was off the books, and they needed the money. They cleaned up the area themselves and met in the break room. Big Sam had detoured to the front office to meet with the manager and collect their fees. The boss morosely informed him that it would be the last extra income. The owners had decided to shut down the warehouse. Big Sam handed out the bonuses to his friends as they stood around the break room. Enjoy it, fellas. We're all getting the axe next week. Hey, let's get together Monday, go over to DMT Solutions to apply. Boss said that's where he's going. His government friend tipped him off that that's where the backdoor business will be shifting to, too. The others agreed, and they all took a good look around the break room where they'd taken their lunches together and talked about all the things that people think are consequential. Then each man filed out and hit the time clock as they left through the side door. They met again Monday morning, just after the boss came back and made the grim announcement to all the employees about the warehouse closing. The trio was back in the break room, and this time they spoke in whispers. Big Sam held up his arm so the others could see clearly. By the time I got home, I had a fever. And I slept all weekend. When I woke up today, this shit had started. He displayed the greenish rash that was lumpy, like spongy moss on his arm around the gash from the crate. The other men had had similar experiences and had similar growths on their hands around their wounds. They all left work to see their doctors. Justin's next day. Justin gripped Ashley's hands as he held little Crystal up for him to kiss goodbye. His son, Caleb, had insisted that he was too big to be held up, and had caused his dad to painfully stretch to lean over and hug him. He'd also insisted that he was too big for kisses and would accept only hugs. He got them, and Justin was glad for the pain. It reminded him that he was alive, and that he had his family around him, and he would soon return to work, and their lives would get back to normal. He'd even discovered that no one had disturbed his SUV. The tow truck driver had found it, and the insurance company had paid for the tow. The repairs were under warranty. He was covered, and he'd be out of the hospital tomorrow morning, absent only his phone, but that was covered too, and he'd pick up his new model on the way home. Yeah, Ash. Hopefully the fever stays light. I'll get out in the morning as planned. Doc increased the antibiotic dose. I can't wait to get home to you and the babes. I'm not a baby, Caleb declared. Okay, big boy, but you best mind Mom and be nice to your sister. Okay, Daddy, the child readily agreed. Justin knew that the agreement was unlikely to last even from this room to the front door of their home. Yet he smiled fondly at his son and winked at his daughter, who was just old enough to catch on to the gesture and giggle as she tucked her head against her mother's neck. Ashley kissed him last, on his forehead. "Oh, you are so hot, Big Daddy," she leaned in and whispered. "It's not just the fever." She raised a little, met his eyes, and then waggled her eyebrows. Justin let out a little laugh and whispered, "Hey, sexy mama. Oh, if you hear from that nice lady who found me on the bridge, let's invite her and whoever she might have to dinner when I get out of this place." Ashley agreed and bundled the kids out of the room. It was just as well. Justin was exhausted. He felt incredibly sleepy, and his open wounds itched a little. His bed was raised, so he looked down at his legs before he covered them with a scratchy hospital sheet and put the bed in sleep configuration. Funny, he thought as he drifted into slumber. Kind of looks like moss growing around the open wounds. Probably just the drugs. And I have a big imagination.
When their young daughter vanishes without a trace on the outskirts of Darktown, a couple's marriage begins to unravel in a secluded cabin deep in the woods. Days pass with no sign of hope, and as the husband tries to hold things together, his wife's grief turns into something darker. The once loving gaze becomes filled with blame and bitterness, and the tension mounts with every hour they spend trapped together in the isolated wilderness. But as night falls and the silence grows suffocating, he realizes her anger may be hiding something even more terrifying than their daughter's disappearance. Is there something Amanda isn't telling him? Or is he losing his grip on reality? In the woods.
"Look, Amanda," I said. "The police are stopping the search. They said they haven't found a trace, and it's been 5 days now." Amanda looked at me with such malice and hatred that I felt a chill running down my spine. "So, you just want to stop the search now? I mean, it's only our daughter. She's out there, frightened, and you just want to stop the search?" I felt as if I'd been punched in the gut. Tears were welling up, but I managed to reply. "Don't even say that. Of course I want them to continue the search, but I'm not in charge of the police. Please, honey, don't see me as the enemy. I love you. I love Charlene." "Don't speak her name," she yelled. "You just see the search as an inconvenience to you. Just leave me be." I did as she asked, going out of the bedroom and into the living room of our cabin. I sat down on the couch, hands on face, and cried over the loss of our daughter, and now, my estranged wife. That night I decided to sleep on the couch. I heard Amanda sobbing throughout the night. Even though I wanted to comfort her, I felt she needed space. The next morning I awoke, tired and stiff from a bad spell of sleep. I decided to make some breakfast, eggs and bacon, and brought it up to her. "Here, darling, I made breakfast," I said. She looked at me with puffy red eyes. "Is that all you can think of, when our daughter is somewhere out there, scared out of her life?" I sighed. "Look, it won't do her any good if we stop our lives, stop taking care of ourselves. You need to eat." She looked away, tears welling up. The day continued like that. Me trying to get any contact to Amanda, and her turning down my attempts. It made me sadder each time, as I really wanted to connect with her again. Needed to connect with her. After all, she was my wife, and I wanted to help her in her situation, as well as help myself. I couldn't go through all of this alone. And I was sure she couldn't either. I had to make some sort of breakthrough. The day went on like that. Me trying to do anything to make a connection with Amanda, and her either ignoring me completely or getting aggressive towards me. Each time I failed, it felt we were gliding farther and farther from each other. Each time felt as if my heart was being stomped on. I felt worse and worse. As the day faded into evening, I decided to make dinner for us. I helped Amanda down to the dining room and sat her in her chair. I sat down in my seat and started eating. A bit into the meal, I glanced over at her, checking how she was doing. She was poking her fork at the meal listlessly, her stare shifting from the meal to the window, then back to the meal, and letting out a long, sad sigh. Pained me to see her like this. Not her normal, cheerful self, but then again, I was a total mess inside. But I felt I had to stay strong, for the both of us. Wouldn't do any good if we both just crumbled down and stopped functioning out here, in the middle of the woods. I was also hungry, on top of all the sadness. Angry that the cops and park rangers decided that it would be too dangerous to continue the search. There had been a massive rain about a week ago. There had been some flooding, and the rangers had said that conditions were bad, and therefore the search would be called off for now. I had shouted at them, pleaded with them, but to no avail. The ranger said that he understood me, but he couldn't risk the lives of the search party. It made me angry that they could just wave off the life of a 4-year-old like that. Such an inconvenience to search for her. And eventually I broke down in tears. Amanda looked at me and started crying too. The next day we were just sat in the dining room, looking at each other, then looking out the window, all in silence. We both knew how each other felt. We also knew we couldn't just go out and search on our own. For starters, we didn't really know the woods. We could easily get lost in there if we went in too far. Secondly, we weren't equipped for a long stretch in the woods, and our clothing wasn't really helpful against the elements. We probably wouldn't survive long if we got lost. No need for that, no matter the circumstances. I tried several times to talk to her. Sometimes she acknowledges me, other times she just stared out the window, or stared right at me, or right past me. She never really answered. Then again, it was hard to make small talk when this had happened, and I didn't know what to talk to her about. The incident was weighing heavily upon both of us, and again, the day seemed to fade away like a dream you can't really remember. I was a bit surprised when I realized it had turned dark outside. I stood up and was going to prepare dinner, and then I thought I heard Charlene's voice coming from the woods. "Mommy! Daddy! I'm scared!" Followed by a short, muffled scream. That's the best I can describe it as. Now I was starting to hear things. I looked at Amanda and saw that her eyes were wide open, as well as her mouth. Had she heard it too? We looked at each other in stunned silence, and then we heard it again. "Mommy! Daddy! I'm scared!" Followed by that muffled scream. But there was something wrong. I just couldn't put my finger on it. But there was something at the back of my mind warning me against this. Amanda shouted, "Charlene!" and leapt up. She didn't even put on shoes. She just ran outside. I tried to call her, to stop her, but she was gone in an instant. I ran after her, hoping she would come to her senses. "Amanda!" I yelled. I saw where she'd run into the woods, darting past trees and stumps. I ran after her as fast as I could. She kept darting out of my sight, but I yelled at her, "Amanda, please, stop!" As I ran into a small clearing, I could see Amanda there, looking in each direction. "Honey, please," I said. "We don't know where she is. It won't help her if we get lost in here." She looked at me with such fury that I thought for a second she hated me. "Well, go back to the cabin. Go back and just leave our daughter out here in the woods. You don't care about her. You don't even care about me." The force of those words, the angry tone, and the hatred in her eyes. The words and our current situation were too much for me. I could feel the tears well up in my eyes. I covered my face with my hands and cried a bit. "Don't even suggest that, honey. You two are my world. I said. As I removed my hands from my face, I realized Amanda was gone. "Amanda!" I screamed. Now I was getting a bit scared. Where had she gone? "Amanda!" I screamed again, more urgently. I heard some rustling of leaves to my right. I didn't think. I just sprinted there, calling out to Amanda every few seconds. It was hard to navigate the woods in the dark. I called out to Amanda, then tried to listen to any sounds, either from Amanda or Charlene. After a few minutes, I heard something behind me. "Mummy, Daddy, I'm scared." But it wasn't Charlene's voice. It sounded like several voices at once. Cold chill ran down my spine. What on earth could that be? Then to my left, I heard Amanda's voice. "Oh, honey, I've missed you so much. Come to Mummy." Followed by a blood-curdling scream. "Amanda!" I yelled as I ran towards the sound. Branches flew by as I hurried towards where I'd heard Amanda screaming. What's going on in these woods? I thought as I ran. Suddenly, I tripped over something. I fell down hard, knocking my forehead. I saw stars as I lay on the ground, wondering what had happened. Then, as my vision started to clear, I realized I'd tripped over a person. A person wearing what seemed to be Amanda's clothing, although it was ripped in places, and there was blood. Oh, God, there was so much blood. I screamed as I realized what I was seeing. It was Amanda, or what was left of her. Her torso had been cut open, from the neck down to her hip. Most of her innards were gone, and her face, oh God, her beautiful face. The eyes were gone. The mouth was open in a terrified scream. I hugged her, crying, screaming her name. The pain was unbearable. And then I heard it, rustling of leaves behind me, and Amanda's voice saying, "Oh, honey, I've missed you so much. Come to Mommy."
We make our last visit of this evening in Darktown to Melinda, who swore she'd never drive at night, especially not to see the father she hadn't spoken to in 15 years. But when his voice cracked over the phone, begging her to come, she found herself on a pitch-black road in the dead of night, under a sky that seemed to swallow every star. After a fruitless, rage-fueled search for his apartment, she turned around, only to find herself on a desolate highway with no idea how to get home. As the clock ticks toward 3 a.m. and fewer cars pass by, Melinda realizes something is terribly wrong. What's lurking in the darkness just beyond her headlights? Why does it feel like someone, or something, is leading her further into the night? The house that death forgot.
Melinda hated driving at night. She did her best to avoid it. Short trips to the store if she just realized she'd run out of tampons or had nothing for dinner after getting home. That sort of thing happened now and then. But she did her best not to go out after dark unless someone was coming to pick her up. So, naturally, she found herself on the longest drive of her life tonight, with no moon, a few stars, swirling clouds above her, and acres of forest on either side. As with so many unpleasant things in her life, this was her father's fault. She hadn't seen or spoken to the bastard in 15 years, but just after falling asleep tonight, no, that was wrong, it'd be yesterday by this time, when out of the blue her phone rang and his voice was on the other end. "I need you, Melly. Please come, now." He said just that, and then the line had gone dead. The old ass was probably drunk, but he'd never called her before, not since she was a child, and he was still trying to convince her mother to take him back. Well, it felt like she'd been dreaming, waking up to hear his voice again after all these years. It sounded like he was crying. His voice had sounded just the same as the last time she'd heard it. As though in a dream, she'd risen, dressed, and gotten in the car. She was well out of town and halfway to his old place before realizing that she had no way of knowing if he even still lived there. She received updates from her mother from time to time over the years about where he was. The last time she'd heard from her mother about him was 7 years ago. Had he ever stayed in one place that long? Well, not to her recollection. She'd been 7 when her mother finally had enough and showed him the door. Prior to that, a move had come every few months. The house they'd been living in was their longest stay in one place, a full 16 months. It turned into 2 years after that, and then the next house had been the one she'd left when she moved out on her own. In all that time, she heard from him sporadically at best, and had finally decided it was best to simply forget about it. Until tonight. She'd found out after a 2-hour drive she'd been right to wonder if he was still in the same place. His last known address was a sketchy apartment in a low-income area of the town that she'd grown up in. Had he been number 24 or number 42? Or maybe he was 14. He definitely had a 4. It didn't matter. His name wasn't on any of the buzzers. Oh, bastard. That drunk of a father had called her at night, all but demanding she come to him for reasons he didn't even feel were important enough to tell her over the phone, and then just expected that she'd know where he lived now. In a flurry of rage, she turned and marched back to her car, slamming the door and starting off from the direction she'd come from. She was so angry she didn't even look where she was going and missed her turn-off. The next thing she knew, she was on this lonely stretch of road. Cars were sparse, but she took some comfort in the fact that she'd pass one every half hour or so. Her dashboard clock now read 2:27 a.m., and she'd been driving for more than 5 hours since leaving her house, at night. Every 5 minutes or so, she checked her cell phone. Ever since realizing she was lost, she checked her phone and found no bars at all. She even stopped at a gas station, closed of course. She was just sure there'd be some service around here somewhere, but nothing. Take stock of your life, Melly, she thought. You're over 30, you hate your job, you and your mother don't get along, you haven't seen or spoken to your father in just under half your life. You have no time for your friends or a relationship thanks to the aforementioned job you hate. And now, here you are, trapped on a road you've never seen before. At night, you can't even so much as call AMA, let alone check Google Maps. Smart lady you are. Well, she briefly considered stopping and flagging down the next car that passed. She quickly realized the futility of that plan. Any car on this road would also have no service, so there was nothing for it. She'd have to drive until she saw a house. Well, she'd feel bad for waking someone up, but there was no choice. She needed to find her way back to the main highway. But so far all that she could see on either side was trees. Mile after mile of trees. No light shining through the boughs. No sign that anyone had ever been here before, except that there was a road, and people were obviously still driving on it. There weren't even any road signs other than the mile markers. Had she really found the middle of nowhere? She was just in the middle of this thought when her headlights illuminated something just up the road. A square wooden sign, obviously made by someone other than the government. Now, this wasn't a gas, a food, or a lodging sign, or a mile marker, or a distance to sign. This looked like the kind of signs advertising a private business was nearby. She slowed down to read it. Granny Royce's Roadhouse. Come stay the night at Granny's. She'll take good care of you. Room, board, low prices, next exit. Well, her heart sped up. She certainly wasn't interested in spending a night at Granny Royce's, but every business had a phone. At the very least, she'd have a map, or know the way back to the highway. So she decided she'd stop there. She almost missed the turn. Granny Royce's Roadhouse was buried at the back of a long, dirt driveway, secluded amid the trees. She was almost past the little dirt road that led back to it before realizing it was there. She skidded to a stop and turned in. The little house lay ahead. It was 2 stories and looked to have about 8 to 10 rooms. Big for a home, but small for anything announcing room and board. She got closer and looked for a vacancy sign. Nothing. It wasn't that the sign wasn't lit. There was no sign. The porch light was on, and the front of the building was illuminated by that light and by her headlights. But no signs of any kind. She almost wondered if she'd gotten the wrong place, but she was certain that she'd seen no other exits between this house and the sign announcing it. She paused in the driveway and took out her cell again. Still no service. She did a quick search for any available wireless signals. To her complete lack of surprise, there were none. Not even any secure. There's no one here but me, she thought. At this point, she wouldn't be surprised to find the house empty as well. But the light was on, and this was supposed to be a roadhouse. Someone would be manning the front desk. She got out of the car and headed for the front porch. As she turned around to make sure the lights flashed when she hit the lock button on her fob, she thought she could see a flash of movement in the trees. Something human-shaped. Well, she stopped and looked again. Nothing. Well, she decided she'd imagined it. At the front of the door, she hesitated. If it really was a roadhouse, then she'd be able to just go on in. But what if she had got the wrong house? If she tried the door and just walked in, she could find herself arrested out here in buckfuck nowhere. Cautiously, she tried the knob. It turned. She pressed gently on the door. It opened. Relief flooded through her when she saw that she was in a small but tastefully decorated foyer that had obviously been repurposed as an admissions area. A quaint desk with an honest-to-God guest book had been placed in the far right corner, and some chairs had been set out, along with magazines on a table. She read the titles briefly. Mademoiselle, Blue Book, The New Country Life, Arts and Architecture, before turning her attention to the little desk. There wasn't a computer. That was a cute touch. It was like the house was from a past era. Perhaps old Granny Royce really didn't like modern technology. There was, however, a little bell, just like there would have been in 1929. It wasn't even the round silver kind you slapped a ring. It was a little porcelain handbell. Well, this place was starting to out-cute her. Oh, please let her have a phone, and please let it use the number plan, not 50s exchanges. She picked up the bell and gave it a shake. Well, for a while, nothing happened. Then she saw a light come on in the back room, and the shadow of an old woman sprang up on the wall. The shadow moved toward her, and within a few seconds, she saw its owner, Granny Royce, who perhaps looked like every grandmother in every storybook ever. "Well, goodness me," she said. "My lands. Good morning, dearie. Pardon my tardiness, but it's been a while since we got guests at this hour. Can I take your name, honey?" Well, Granny Royce was smallish, her grey hair tied in a neat bun behind her head, a dress that would have looked like it belonged to a senior citizen in the 20s, and a faded pink sweater. Melinda thought that she looked just like she would have wanted her own grandmother to look like, but her mother's mother had died when she was young, and she never met her father's mother. It almost hurt to deny this sweet little woman her business, but nevertheless, she had to get home. "Actually, I'm sorry," she began, "but the fact is, I'm lost. I'm not even sure where I am in the direction of." "Oh, you poor thing," said Granny Royce. "You just sit down and let me fix you some tea, or something. You must be cold." "Really, thank you, but I'm okay," Melinda said gently. "I just need to use the phone if I could, or if you've got a map, even that will be lovely. I really only live a couple of hours from here." She trailed off, not knowing if she was even right about that. She easily could have driven those 5+ hours in the wrong direction entirely. "Oh dear," said the old woman sadly. "I'm sorry, honey, but the phone lines are down. As for a map, well, I used to have one, and If I look, I still might, but it's probably quite out of date by now. Well, the highway moved since then, I know that much. Melinda's heart sank. How could her luck get any worse? No phone, cell, or landline, had no map. What could she do? She had to get back home. She was expected to work at 8 a.m. tomorrow. And why were the phone lines down? The weather was coldish but clear. Were they fixing a line nearby? Well, she told Granny Royce the name of her town, but Granny only said, "Oh, believe it or not, I've never heard of that town. What'd you say the name was?" She told her again. "Nope, doesn't ring a bell. I'm sorry. I could not say which direction it's in. Why don't you stay the night, sweetie? I'll give you a discount for your trouble." "Thank you. That's very kind of you. But I have to work tomorrow, and I need to get back home. I'm not even sure why I'm out tonight. The only reason I had doesn't seem to matter anymore." "Honey, I wouldn't advise trying to drive back that far tonight," Granny Royce said. "Why, it's almost 3 in the morning. You haven't had any sleep. Maybe the lines will be up in the morning, and you can call your work and let them know you'll be late." "Oh, that won't work either," she replied. "I'm the opener. No one will be there. No, I'm sorry. I've really got to leave. I'll just head in the other direction until I find the road I was on." At that, Granny Royce's expression, already one of kind concern, seemed to shift somewhat to one of fear. She paused, looking at Melinda as though she wanted to say something else to keep her inside. Finally she said, reluctantly, "All right, honey, if you're sure, just you be careful now. Don't speak to nobody till you're back on the road." Well, that last warning seemed a little silly. After all, what was Melinda, a little girl? She thanked Granny Royce for her kindness and headed back to the car. About halfway to the car, she remembered thinking she'd seen something moving in the trees. While her eyes scanned both sides of the secluded little cleared area she was in, looking for anything that appeared to be moving on its own rather than being blown by the slight wind. She saw nothing. Satisfied, she headed for her car. All 4 tires were flat. Oh, God damn it. She leaned down and saw long slash marks on each tire. Someone in this little slice of green acres had slashed her tires in the time it had taken her to find out she had no way of contacting anyone tonight. Oh, kids from a local farmhouse. Gotta be, she thought grimly. Well, nothing else to do, so you might as well go out at night and slash tires. She stopped and let the reality sink in. She wasn't going anywhere tonight. She had no choice now. She had to stay the night here until morning, when hopefully the phone lines would be up and she could call someone from work to ask them to go in for her, and then AMA to get her tires dealt with. She sighed and walked back into the house. She could hear Granny Royce as she was walking back to her room. She'd already turned off the lights. Resigned to her fate, Melinda rang the bell once again. "Oh, that you, miss?" she heard Granny Royce call. "Yes, it's me," she answered. "Oh, sorry to be a bother. My name's Melinda Orton. Sorry I never mentioned it before. I guess I will take a room for the night, if the offer's still good." "Oh, of course it is, dearie," said Granny Royce, re-entering the room and turning the lights back on. "Melinda, oh, that's such a pretty name, honey. Well, let's get you situated. You put your name and arrival time in the book there, and I'll get you a key. All the boarding rooms are on the 2nd floor. There's only a couple left." "Well, there are others here." This was surprising. Not a single car had been in the front lawn when she pulled in. "Ah, yes, Miss Melinda." Granny was pottering around in the adjacent room. "Mr. Norris, young Calvin, there's a few of us here." She came back out with a key in her hand. "Oh, just out of curiosity, what made you change your mind?" She seemed to brighten as she asked the question, as though relieved that Melinda would stay after all. "Oh, it's probably just local kids getting kicks," she said. "But I found my tires slashed." Granny stopped suddenly, her face twisted with concern and worry. Then she resumed, as though nothing was wrong. "Oh, nothing to be done for it, I suppose," she said with an air of sadness. Well, not until morning at any rate, said Melinda. Then hopefully the lines will be up. Oh, said Granny Royce distractedly. Yes, hopefully. She led Melinda up the darkened staircase into an empty, quiet hall. Or perhaps not so quiet. From one end of the hall came the muffled sound of someone crying. Whoever it was crying softly, not with anger or petulance or fear, but with deep sadness. It sounded as if crying was something this person was used to, but they were still unable to stop. "Who's that?" she asked, pointing in the direction the crying was coming from. "Oh, pay that no mind, honey," said Granny. "That's just Mr. Norris. He's been like that a while. Older man, you understand. Not all there." She tapped her temple. "Oh, I understand," Melinda replied, but wondered privately how an old, out-of-touch man would wind up at a roadhouse. "Has he been here long?" "Oh, a while, I'd say," answered Granny. "Don't recall how long, actually." "Well, how does he pay for room and board?" "Oh, I guess he doesn't drive it," she said to the old woman. "Actually, it doesn't look like anyone else here has a car." Granny started at this, looking up with an almost guilty expression. "Oh, well," she said, "that kind of thing is the business of the guests. I don't ask about such things." She turned the key in the lock of the room she'd led Melinda to and opened the door. Turning on the light, she showed Melinda the quaint little room. Melinda thought it looked like stepping into the past. She could swear this room would have looked modern in the early 50s at the earliest. Come to think of it, so could the rest of this place, she thought. No wireless service, no computer, that old bell, and those magazines, well, they looked new, but... That thought was cut off as Granny put the key on the nightstand and started in with instructions. "Now, the bathroom's down the hallway there. They'll be sharing with the whole floor, so please bear that in mind if you have to go. There's a shower schedule on the door as well. First come, first served. Just add your name to the first available line. That's the order the showers are in. I wouldn't worry about it if I were you, though. I'm sure you'll be first in line. I get up at 6 a.m. sharp every morning and start breakfast. You come down whenever you're ready, and I'll whip up something for you. Oh, and one last thing, my dear. I'd strongly advise you not to leave the house until sunup. Well, you just never know what could happen out there in the dark." "Of course," she replied. "I'd never go out there in the dark if I didn't have to." Well, she stopped that train of thought right out of the gate. After a few moments, she was alone. Alone without anything to wear to bed, and nothing to shower, brush her teeth, or hair with in the morning. She sat on the bed and looked out the window, which faced front. Her car still sat where she'd left it, the only thing for miles that seemed like part of her world. And an expensive, overlarge paperweight until I can get hold of someone, she thought bitterly. And despite the hominess of the room, she felt an unwillingness to rise and shut off the light. Somehow the thought of going to sleep in this backward little room seemed unthinkable. So instead she continued to sit and stare out of the window. A figure in black detached itself from the shadows of the trees and made its way to her car. What the hell? She jumped up and ran to the window. The figure was tall and seemed to be wearing a cloak made of night. She saw its arm extended. In its hands was a long, jagged dagger. It dragged the dagger across the side of her car, leaving a long gash mark in the paint and metal. "Hey!" she shouted. The figure kept dragging the dagger. She reached for the window to open it. It wouldn't budge. She looked for a lock, but couldn't see one. "Hey!" she yelled again. And this time the figure raised its head. She could see the glint of 2 eyes under the hood. The figure raised the dagger, slowly, determinedly. It pointed it straight at her face. Well, she leapt away from the window and ran for the door. A noise on the other side stopped her. Footsteps, dragging, shambling footsteps. And crying. The sound of a person for whom deep, longing sadness is a way of life. Mr. Norris. She waited. Somehow she just felt that she should let the old man pass before she opened the door. Before he got very far, however, she heard other footsteps, these much quicker and lighter, running up the stairs and stopping near the door to her room. "Stop it," hissed Granny Royce. "Go back in your room right now. You know better. She can't see you yet. Hopefully she won't have to at all. Now, you get back in there. You've no business being out here at this hour anyway." What on earth? How could that sweet old woman talk to another human that way, let alone an old man with a foggy mind? Well, she almost opened the door right then, but somehow her hand stopped and waited until the shuffling, crying man had made his way back down the hallway. She heard his door open. She opened her own door just in time to see his foot, shod in a well-worn house shoe, slide into his room. The door closed softly after him. "Oh, that poor man," she thought. But now she was determined to find out what was going on. The punk outside in the Halloween costume slashing up her car, followed by Granny yelling at an old man, had made her begin to understand that not all was well here. She went back down to the front desk area, which was completely unlit except for the moonlight and porch light coming from the window. There was, however, a light on near the back room that Granny Royce had emerged from before. Melinda paused to take a look outside the front window. The maniac with the dagger was nowhere to be seen for the moment, but she was now determined that it was he that she'd seen moving from the trees. What? He could have killed me. She strode in the direction of the light, seeing that it was the light to the kitchen. She kept going, expecting to find Granny Royce still pottering about with whatever an old innkeeper did with herself during the early hours of the morning. Instead, she found Granny sitting with a young man of about 20. He had dark hair and a scruff of stubble and was wearing a dark brown corduroy shirt and khakis, along with a pork pie hat. He looked like he was ready to go sell newspapers on a street corner in the 30s. He was quietly sipping tea while Granny was admonishing him from the other end of the table. "Now, that was a horrible thing to say," she said. "When I was your age, young men minded their manners." "That's a laugh, talking about my age," muttered the young man with a sneer. "Just how old are you? Do you even remember?" "Calvin Davidson, you are trouble, young man," she hissed back. Neither had noticed Melinda yet. "One of these days you're going to say something you'll regret." "Oh, come on, Granny. What could I possibly say that will make things worse than they already are?" demanded Calvin. "I mean, look at old Mr. Norris up there. Both of us are... Oh, hello, miss. I didn't know we had anyone else here." He'd just seen Melinda. Hi," she said. She had the feeling she'd walked in on an old argument the two of them had had many times, and that did not concern her. Her fear and anger were forgotten for the moment. Calvin had been talking to Granny like a sullen kid, but something about what they were saying seemed... wrong. "Well, can I help you, Melinda?" asked Granny Royce. "Is there something wrong with your room?" Well, that brought her back. "No," she said. "The room's fine, but nothing else is. I mean, what on earth do you even have a roadhouse out here, where it seems like no one else ever stops? Why are most of the rooms full, even though mine is the only car out there? Why did I hear you talking to Mr. Norris like he was a dog? Why would you want to make sure I didn't see it?" Well, she got no further before Calvin cut her off. "Oh, good Lord. She's not even been here a night and she can see it. Why did you even let her in, Granny? Why don't you just bolt the door? Hell, if I could go take down that sign, don't you think I would have done it by now? Lord love a duck." Now, there's something you don't hear many young men say, thought Melinda. She decided to ignore Calvin for the moment, otherwise. "Oh, and besides that, there's someone out there. He's the freak who slashed my tires, and he's been out there messing up my car since then. You can't even call the police. I mean, are you going to tell me you've never had vandals out here before?" There was a long pause in the room. Neither Granny nor Calvin seemed willing to break it. Calvin scratched at his neck. For the first time, Melinda noticed a red slash at his throat, half hidden by his collar. It looked like either a very fresh scar or a slightly healed wound. "Listen, miss, I don't know your name," he finally said. "Melinda," she told him. "Melinda," he repeated. "Melinda, I think you should sit down. I have to tell you something that you may find troubling." Melinda didn't like how he said that. She also didn't like the way his tone had switched from sullen child to serious adult. He looked several years her junior, but he was talking to her like he was her uncle or her boss. He swallowed a sip of tea and sighed. Then he looked her straight in the face and said, "The reason I don't have a car out there is that when I got here, no one my age, no one in my line of work, would have owned a car. It would have seemed like an impossible dream." What are you talking about?" she asked hesitantly. "Well, I worked in a textile mill," he said. "The mill was shut down by the time I got here. Most businesses were. So I struck out on my own, a drifter looking for what work I could find. And I stopped here. Forever." "Businesses were shut down? I don't understand," said Melinda. "We're having a rough time of it right now, but businesses are mostly staying open." "Not then they weren't," said Calvin sadly. "I arrived here in 1929. Melinda blinked. Something had exploded behind her eyes. "Well, this place was new then," said Granny. "My man and I had just opened it. Young Mr. Calvin was a sweet young lad of 16. I offered to take him on as hired help over my husband's objections. Well, my husband was a well-meaning man, but he knew how to pinch a penny. 'Twas a year after I took Calvin on that Mr. Royce died. Calvin and I have been here ever since. And every few years or so, someone joins us." "Yep," Calvin broke in. "Miss Tilly was first. She was a woman of ill repute who ran here, pregnant and scared that the man who'd run her trade up in New York was going to find her and kill her. Well, she and that baby—" He broke off, now seeming on the point of tears. "And then," said Granny, "there's Mr. Standish. He was a traveling minister. He doesn't travel anymore." "Mr. Norris got here in '69, said Calvin. "His story is probably the worst. He was a bank robber, you see, carried a pistol. He didn't like learning how long we'd all been here." He paused, stood and walked to the kitchen window. "He tried to leave on his own, you see. He ain't the first to try it. That was me, actually. Well, I warned him not to try, but he wouldn't listen. But when he got outside and he met him—" "Calvin," hissed Granny, "we don't talk about this." "She's got to know," said Calvin. "There's no point in her finding out slowly." "Yeah, but there's still a chance for her," said Granny in a stage whisper. "All she has to do is wait until morning." "Well, she's not going to wait until morning," said Calvin with some remorse in his voice. "No one ever waits until morning. The fact that she came down here is proof enough of that. Besides, what good would that really have done her? Her car is useless. We have no phones here. There was no phone when this place went up, and there won't ever be a phone here. You know that." "Okay, everyone, stop," Melinda shouted. "That's enough. Now, you can't keep me prisoner here, and I have no intention of staying any longer. Only that knife-wielding maniac out there is keeping me from running up the road this minute. Now, I need to know what's really going on here, and I need to know it now." "Look, we've been telling you," Calvin said. "Granny may not want you to know everything, but you need to, because you won't be leaving. Oh, we're not trying to keep you prisoner. I don't even care if you run out that door right now. But you'll never leave this house again afterward." "Like hell I won't," yelled Melinda. "Listen, child," said Granny, rising from her spot at the table. "Listen, please. None of us mean you harm, my dear, not even Mr. Norris. Well, there's scant he can do any more, and he knows it. That's why he's up there crying all the time. But we're stuck here, all of us." I hope there was a chance for you to run for it in the morning, but Calvin's right. There's no guarantee you'll be safe in the morning anyhow. What the hell is wrong with this place? Choked out Melinda. She was beginning to break down. She could feel the tears welling in her eyes. It was about a month after Mr. Royce died, said Calvin, when he came. He was wearing that long black robe and carrying that ridiculous dagger. I saw him when I was trimming the hedges in the back. I told him he needed to get out of here because I didn't like his look. He moved so fast I never saw it coming. And he got me from here. Calvin touched his neck. To here. He touched his lower abdomen on the opposite side from the neck slash. He began to undo his shirt, and Melinda almost vomited. Under his shirt was a long, ugly slash that went deep and was still seeping blood. She could even see bone, muscle, and intestines wriggling within the mangled ruin. I died that night, said Calvin. But then, I didn't. The next thing I knew, I was being dragged into the house by Granny, and when I woke up, I nearly scared her to death. She was sure that I was gone. And the thing is, I was. But I was awake. I could talk, walk, do anything I could while alive. Well, except take any enjoyment or nourishment from food or drink anymore. Well, I still drink the tea because it keeps my skin from turning ash gray. Well, I learned that about 50 years ago. He didn't go away, though. Granny broke in. I went out to deal with him, carrying my axe. Well, he took my axe and buried it in my bag. Oh, I won't show you the wound, honey. Calvin shouldn't have shown you his, either. No one should have to see it. But, well, that's how he works, Melinda, continued Calvin. He's got that knife, but if you try to use a weapon on him, he just moves like he does and takes it from you. You never stand a chance. He'll use whatever weapon you try to take him down with to end you. Mr. Norris learned that the hard way. This is not happening. Melinda was ready to break down, but she had to hold it together. She had to get out of here somehow. Nothing about this was right. Nothing about it could be real. No, it was all a dream. Too much didn't make sense. Her father calling her out of the blue, her leaving to go to him without a second thought, getting lost so quickly and so irreversibly. No cell phone service anywhere on this road. This place and everything about it. She was dreaming. That had to be it. But if so, she was going to survive this dream. She turned and ran for the stairs. Her purse was still in her room, but she was going to grab it and go. She'd had enough. And protesting voices began babbling behind her, and she cared not one whit. Mr. Norris was waiting at the top of the stairs. Oh, contrary to Granny Royce's description of him, he wasn't old at all, no more than about 40. But she saw instantly what she meant by not all there. The top half of Mr. Norris's head looked normal, like a reasonably attractive man with dark hair peppered with grey here and there. His eyes, a clear green, were moist with fresh tears. The lower half of his face was a ruin of bone fragments, shredded muscle and blood. So much blood. His left side was similarly destroyed. His arm hung on a few hanging strings of muscle. His hip was just as much a mess of bone and blood as his face was. He kept his one good hand on the banister as he shuffled toward her. Behind him stood a young woman in a bra and a pair of panties. Her stomach was cut open, and looking out of the wound with bright, intelligent eyes was the mangled remains of a baby. Melinda turned and bolted for the front door. Her hand had just closed around the knob when Calvin rushed up to her, placing his freezing cold hand over hers. "They're not going to hurt you," he said quickly, "but he will. If you step out for so much as a moment, he will kill you, and it'll hurt, and it'll go on hurting forever. After a while, you learn to function with the pain, but it never goes away." Sobbing, she asked the question she'd been afraid to ask since coming here. "Who is he? We don't know, said Granny from behind Calvin. He just came here, and he won't go away. He likes to watch us and do things to incite us to come out again. As soon as someone does, he hurts them more. But no matter how many times he kills us, we won't die. Believe me when I say we all wish we could. Well, Melinda had had enough of this. She pushed Calvin away and threw open the door. He was standing on the porch. The knife was held out in front of him, just at face level. Melinda ran into him at a rush, the knife puncturing her right eye and its tip sliding on through out the other side. She just managed to see the grinning, pure white face of her killer before everything went blank. A few hours later, the house erupted with screams from upstairs as Melinda awoke to a world of pain, the like of which she'd never known.
So, my dear friends, that is a format I've played with on and off for just an incredible amount of time. I think I first did one of those in, 2016, 2017, so almost as old as the channel. And I really enjoy doing this. I think it's just a format that works well, especially when you've got shorter stories which have never ever been as popular on my channel. Anything under half an hour, and people just don't want to watch. It's a crying shame because a lot of those stories are excellent. Anyway, that's beside the point. So I found this format where I think I can pull them all together, create this ambiance, this environment where you imagine going from street to street, from one part of the city to the next, where all kinds of horrible and bizarre things are happening. And it's something I really enjoy, and, well, I haven't done it for quite a while now. It just kind of popped into my mind, okay, let's find a few stories, create this atmosphere, and just let things roll. So if you enjoy it, I will return to this more frequently from now on. It's something I personally think is quite effective. But who am I to tell you what you like? All right, enough of this waffling. It's crazy hot here on this beautiful summer's day, and my office is like an oven, so I'm out of here now. Till the next time, my friends, you all sleep well, yeah?
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. It really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams, and bye-bye.